Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of The Truth from the Booth. I am DJ Prophet. This is episode 19. Today's very special guest is a long time family brother to me. He is a not only an amazing musical artist, he's a lyricist, a singer, songwriter, producer. He is a former extreme professional athlete. He is a touring artist, lifelong artist. I don't know, other than athleticism, if he's done anything else other than perform, write, and live this life. He
Man,
is legendary man, myth, the legend, CK Jones. CK Jones, welcome to Truth from the Booth.
dude, it's an honor to be here, man. Thank you.
No doubt. Glad we can lock you in. Coming to us live from, at the moment, New Mexico, I believe. Yes.
Yes, I'm in the homeland, the land of entrapment. I'm at the family compound here visiting family, and yeah, so it's a
You know, the
good
funny
spot
thing
to
is,
do it. Grounded.
yes, you are the third guest of mine out of New Mexico.
Really?
My good buddy Brandon DJ Flips, he's from New Mexico, and then my buddy DJ Mike Soul was also out of New Mexico as also. So
All right.
New Mexico's got talent,
Yes, yes. That's cool.
obviously. So I want to get to the origin story. You know, we'll get into our relationship, but I want to kind of get ahead of that a little bit on your growing up, your influences, and what kind of sparked this passion and life's commitment for you to pursue these dreams of being an artist.
Yeah, I mean, that one's a wild one because for me, music was something that was an influence of my lifestyle. But growing up, as you said, in the intro there, it was like I was more focused on athletics, coming from a family of my two parents that were athletes, and my mom was on the US ski team. And so I was brought up in the winter sports world of ski racing, and then transitioning to, at that time, in the late 80s early 90s time, snowboarding was coming in to be like the cool rebellious thing. And I was ski racing but also keeping my eye on the pulse, as kids are, and going in my teen years. And so snowboarding kind of became something more appealing to me because I skateboarded growing up. So I transitioned to snowboarding and then becoming competitive snowboarder, and then obviously professional. Sports, winter sports were my focus, and then sports in general, just kinda like, and a lot. I did do some team sports, but I moved from Western New York at a very, very young age to Northern New Mexico in the late '80s. And if you're familiar with New Mexico, especially in the late '80s, being a small white boy, in a by a long shot, by a long way, those kind of team sports, your typical American football, baseball, basketball weren't really an option for me. Even, I would have had to be the ultimate Pistol Pete, to be able to even make it on the backup team, just due to, my culturally, man. So obviously I gravitated to, independent sports growing up as a ski racer, and then, skateboarding, and then snowboarding, and then, things of that nature. So that was something more. And obviously before all of that, I will say my original love, which is still like the one sport that I follow, is motocross. Cause before I moved to New Mexico, dirt bikes have been my life, and still my number one favorite thing in the world, and in the athletic world, is dirt bikes. But yeah, so music was just kind of the soundtrack to that, right? And so I never saw myself as a musician. Although, interestingly enough, backstory is both my parents met while working in the skiing industry, but they met through music. My mom was singing, my dad was playing guitar, and they sat down one day in, passing, basically ended up like jamming together, and then kind of fell in love from there. That's a very short snip of it, but they're both into music, singers and players. And so it's kind of interesting that I would end up in music, because music is kind of what brought them together, even though they were in the skiing world. So yeah, it wasn't, I would always mess around, listening to, of course, in my teen years, again, in that time, being in the skateboarding, snowboarding, punk rock and hip hop music were very, predominant in that time. Although I did come from a Western New York background where a lot of my family is, like ranch and people like that. And so they would, they a lot of country music, stuff like that, that was in my roots, still, and so, there was that. But I know when I was moving in the teen years, I was definitely very intrigued with the hip hop movement at that time as a young teen, and punk rock. And I would mess around freestyling and stuff. But again, that was just like kind of one of those things you do late at night, hanging out, listening to beats and DJs and stuff. And then Yeah, somehow in the mid to late '90s, I was a professional snowboarder, and I ended up, having a knee injury and had to, do some recuperation of an ACL replacement. And in that time, I had already moved away to Colorado where the snowboarding was happening, and I came back to Taos, the northern where I grew up. Ended up hanging out with some of my old buddies that I grew up with. One of them being my best friend still to this day, Norm. And he was the drummer. And shout out Big NC. He
Big
was
Norm.
playing in a band, and I kind of like hung out. And this could be a whole podcast episode in itself, is just the forming and the lifestyle of tabula rasa, as you know well. But long story short is I ended up playing with this band, and things happened kind of fast, and before I even knew it, I ended up not going back to the snowboard world, and we kind of like hit the road, to say it briefly. At that time, obviously there was none of this internet stuff going on like it is today, so it was still like, you're sending out press packs and you're making phone calls and you're getting in your van and you're driving all over the country or to these places trying to get gigs. So that's what we did. Literally, we left New Mexico and headed out west, which is eventually where we ran into you. So, and then you and I's relationship started at that time. So that was it. I just, went from sports into music in a real wild way. I never planned on being in the music business. And I always say music found me. It was like, that was like my thoughts and patterns were always Winter Olympics, which, in 1996 I did the Winter Olympic trials, and not, excuse me, for snowboarding for half pipe. I didn't make the team because that was the first ever snowboarding in the Olympics, and it was kind of like their trial base. And so, yeah, I didn't make the team, but I did all the qualifiers. I was very young at the time. I was, late teenage years. So, but that was like my goal, was the Winter Olympics. So I made it all the way to that point, and then the knee injury happened, and I ended up in the music business, and I ended up moving to Los Angeles where there's no snow.
No, well, there is, but not the kind you ride a
Yeah,
snowboard on.
exactly. Different kind of skiing. Different kind of skiing.
Well, man, that's amazing. When we first met, I knew a little bit of that backstory. Having the athletic background and going into music is very similar to my story. And when we first met up on Bloomfield in the wonderful city of Studio City or North Hollywood border, that was part of this part that, I was obviously into music myself. And when you guys pulled up in that motorhome, it was like some real rock star, homegrown rock star shit. We hit it off right away, obviously. And I think I used to sell you guys weed.
Yep, yep, yep. Because you live downstairs from BZ and
Yeah.
Joaquin.
So
Yep.
that was an amazing time. You mentioned not having the social media. Thank God, but damn, if we did, what an amazing story that we were telling during those days, because eventually you guys went from the RV to, did you get the apartment across the street?
Yeah, so well, that
Yeah.
was actually not our apartment, that was
It was
Nigel, my
Nigel's, right?
younger brother's, yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he ended up coming out, like, a year into our journey and then going to the LA recording workshop, which then took him on his journey in the music business, obviously, which, obviously we have our stuff together with, successful records, but he did his thing as well, so it was like, but up until that point, my brother was on a complete different journey in his life coming up through his teen years, and he just decided to, kind of, one of the many stages that we all go through our life where you just start over and recreate yourself. And that was his first, thing coming out. And so, yeah, he got that apartment, and then we would park, so like I was saying earlier, we moved out to Los Angeles in 2000 in a 1978 Dodge van. And then which is kind of come into this story because you had asked me the other day about Puck, from the real
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
So that Dodge van, the only people we really knew in Los Angeles at the time was my drummer, my best friend Norman. His sister lived in Studio City, right down the street from Bloomfield, where I met you, and she lived on this wash that was like, back then it was right by either the CBS or NBC studios. I can't remember, but there was this little wash area by the river that didn't have any houses, so you could stash the van, and we would sleep in the van on the floors under the bench seats, and then her apartment was right there. And then obviously Puck ended up living on that same street. So he peered through the window one day and saw us all sleeping on the floor. And then that's how our relationship with Puck started. But we started in that van, and then after like 7 months, we blew a transmission seal, had to limp it back to New Mexico, and we ended up, another long story and said, we ended up with an RV and then piled back into that RV and drove it out. And then we would park that RV on that street where we met you, because there was also like a stash spot because of that
Yeah.
elementary school that was there
Yep.
that
The
had that
church.
one wall. So yeah, so we wouldn't get messed with at night, So
Yeah. Talk about like I don't think people understand the sacrifice that you guys made. I mean, sleeping in a van until the motor blew, like what was it? And you guys were booking yourselves, calling up venues,
100%, 100%.
and that grind kind of was just unheard of these days.
Yeah.
And talk about some of the struggles that, I mean, 5 guys, right? 5 of you? Was it 4 or
Well,
5?
there's 4 of us in the band, and then we would always kinda have, like, well, we had Ollie Bell, Old Dirty, who
Yeah.
would show up, and he was at that time kinda trying to be a film cat, which again, going back to the social media thing, we did have someone, as we had our own vlogger, like, but
Yeah.
we didn't know what that wasn't a thing then, right? That was, he literally had tapes, still to this day has a storage unit full of like probably hundreds of hours, our 7 8 years as a band and living on the streets and traveling all over the country, that are just raw footage that he's not even touching, right? But he was like the fifth member that was the video guy. So
We
um
need to digitize that.
it would be amazing, man. It would be amazing. We did an official DVD, which some of that footage was on. And then he actually did 2 more DVDs that never got released, that are 2 of our first US tours, total DIY tours, which are amazing. But he never released it. That's, again, another journey of a story, because his journey is crazy as well with us. But I going to what you said as far as like unheard of is like the at that time, coming out to LA, being right now, New Mexico is like a hot spot of like trendy, right? You say you're from New Mexico, like, ooh, it in 2000, 1999 and 2000, people were like, that's in America? And
Yeah, yeah.
like literally,
Like,
like, it's like
is that where
Breaking Bad all
Roswell
of a sudden.
happened?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah, it's
where
like Breaking Bad put Albuquerque on the map, because you said Albuquerque, people didn't know what it was. So, like, we get out there and, like, nobody would take us seriously if we even said anything, like, things that I did that would put it in perspective, like, obviously, phone calls, right? They're not even emails at the time, really. I mean, you could, but it was like it wasn't so commonplace. So, it was really about physical press kits, going to Kinko's and Xeroxing out the band photo with the bio and like showing the list of places you played, and then having your contact info, and then sending it in the mail, and then following up with phone calls, right? And so with those phone calls, and then hoping they would answer the phone, and if they did, like, take you seriously to listen to you, or even open the package that you sent. And so one thing that I did, like, that we got savvy with, was I ended up literally creating a fake booking agency and calling myself a different name, and I would call as a booking agent for the band Tabula Rasa, and I had a different voice, and I had the whole 9, man. I, like, created this alter ego, and, like, to book, because nobody would take you seriously unless you had a, booking agency. We used the out of state, thing in our advantage with LA, was because, okay, we're from New Mexico and there's an agency that's representing, so we got at least, so that some of the things is like just fake it till you make it type of stuff that we were doing. And then the other thing that we were doing is we had that RV, and we had a generator on the RV that would create the power. So we would set all of our equipment up inside the RV and then drive to like the beach, and then jump out in the fire lane, set the equipment up as fast as we could, plug it into the generator, and we would start playing until the cops came to shut us down. And then we would have our CDs, because at that time people actually had physical, tangible goods to sell, like our CD. And we sold our CDs to the people on the beach until we created enough of a name for ourselves to where the venues kind of had heard of us, and so those were the tactics, some of the tactics that we used to kind of create a swell at a time where it was really tough to like do anything else because you couldn't get people to go, oh, check out my page and my streams and my followers and my videos or any of that stuff. You know, it's like
You couldn't go live. I mean,
no,
everything that we were and everything that we were doing then is now 10 million times more exposure because it's
yeah,
nothing new. People are popping up and doing YouTube sets and doing rooftops and setting up pop-up parties in places. It's just funny to be so ahead of our time, even way back then,
yeah,
that it's just the network of communication wasn't as quickly as you said. People weren't using emails. It was like two-way pagers
yeah. Oh,
and
dude, yeah.
Blackberries.
BlackBerry was a thing, man. And honestly, I kind of miss the BlackBerry, dude. Like I
Yeah, me
remember,
too.
like everybody does now too. I think it's like, oh man, we had it good.
I was reminiscing with Joaquin not too long ago, another one of the Bloomfield Brigade
Yep.
back in the day. It's singer-songwriter. He and we are like, man, we were doing everything as far as like a little compound of music to grind our way to where we wanted to be. A lot of us aren't doing it anymore, but in that little pocketed era, it's almost a better thing that we didn't get the fame and the fortune that we wanted to get or were
Oh, dude,
after because we would have fucked
100%.
that shit up.
100%. I mean, and on a lot of different levels, I've had this conversation before, you know, it's like, because people ask me like, like, what's success? And I'm like, well, you know, if you had asked me what success is when I was 21, the definition and description of it would be a lot different than what my answer is today after everything that I've gone through. Right. And like, and even with that, just like with social media and knowing the anybody who knows me knows my career of like evolution through sonically and image and you name it, bro. I've done run the gambit, right? So and everything is like on display these days. You know, it's to the point where it's so much that you can do whatever because to even get noticed is crazy. So like constant change is almost something you have to do. But then it was like, man, I had some eras that I'm like, I'm kind of glad that wasn't on, you know, that wasn't being like, you know,
Because that's what people are gonna remember forever, and it's
straight
really
up.
hard to break out of that once somebody
Yep.
has an idea of who you are.
Yeah, and also yourself. I think that's another thing, being privy to again, hindsight is always 2020 and being able to reflect on my career now 25 plus years into it, as you were saying, not doing anything else. Like up until 2.5 years ago, like I literally from 1999 till 2 years ago didn't do anything except this, you know, the touring, trying to, you know, quote unquote, make it in the business. Right. And so, like, as a recording artist, as whatever I could be, just that was it. It was there was nothing else in my mind. I was like a racehorse with blinders. Right. And so, like, I mean, we'll get into 2.5 years ago down the line here in the story, but like, it's wild to just my perspective on the people that I was around at that time. And I've seen, and, you know, I can say that they're friends of mine that are extremely famous people that in the music business as well as, you know, Hollywood in general, but and seeing like the ones that got that fame, quote unquote, at that time, you know, that early age, right? And like where you think you know who you are, but you really have no freaking clue who you are, you know? But like, so looking back for myself, going, man, it's a blessing because I see how you could get trapped in a character that you created at that time because you were young. Then everybody fed that character as like, that's who you are. And then 20 some years later, you're stuck in this character that you actually aren't, but that's what the world knows you as. So you feel like that's that Coke bottle that you got to dress yourself up in every day and go out and meet the world because that's all anybody knows. And so you feel obligated, right? And we all know as people and as humans, we change, you know, and hopefully you can realize that as a person that it's okay, you know, like to evolve and to change and like different things as we grow and mature. And so that's to me going back to has been a blessing that I've had to come to that understanding, right? Like to really take a step back to reflect on my career, reflect on the people that I know and who I've seen and what their trajectory was in comparison to mine, and be very grateful and thankful that certain things worked out the way they did and maybe in a way that at the time I wasn't so happy about. Right? So
Yes.
fortunate, unfortunate, all those things, you know, it's the scale of the balance. But yeah, it's been it's wild like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to touch on for those of our listeners and watch and viewers that don't know, I mean, there has been major points of success and world tours and millions of streams on guest spots and songs that you've had. And after Tabula Rasa, which I'm sure everyone grew and aged and girlfriends and wives.
Lives and wives.
Yes. Fucking women break up the goddamn band. No, after Tabula Rasa, you kind of dipped into the hip hop scene really hard and
Full
were
on,
able
yeah.
to get with some legends, like absolute legends. I know KRS-One, had Lion, you had a beautiful relationship, or I don't say beautiful, but a great working relationship with,
Still
like
to
full
this day,
action.
yeah.
Yeah, to this day. Talk about that kind of journey and where you were as an artist coming out of Tabula Rasa. Did you move back home or did you stay out?
Yeah, it's funny. I say the lives and wives, and when I perform now, I kind of tell the story of the transition from this first band that I was in, Tabula Rasa, to the first generation of me being a solo artist and a songwriter, and that. And I say, the lives and the wives happen. They got wives and lives, and I chose music as my wife and my
You
life, right?
did.
So like,
Yeah.
and they, long story short, they moved back to New Mexico and started the quote unquote normal life, which is, no one's life is normal, but you get what I'm saying. And I stayed in Los Angeles and I spent 2 decades, like in that realm. And so one of the first things that happened is that in 2005 we were as a band on the Vans Warp Tour, and there was, as people know at that time, hip hop was not a big staple of the Vans Warp Tour. So we had like the little redheaded stepchild stage that was in the back corner called the Code of the Cuts stage, which was a DJ Adverse and her crew, Code of the Cuts, and Gorilla Fist out of the East Coast, and they created this like underground hip hop stage. And so we were on it. There was an amazing rapper and songwriter named Astronautilus. He was on it. The one and only One Below was on it. So there was a lot of us that were traveling the country on this little, redheaded stepchild hip hop stage in the corner of Van's Warp Tour. So on that tour, as we were playing, there was also a band on the Ernie Ball stage called Lords of Brooklyn. And Lords of Brooklyn was like a rock and roll, hip hop, rap rock type of crew out of Brooklyn, New York. And the lead singer and rapper is named Caves. Caves also a very famous graffiti artist out of New York, now a tattoo artist and aficionado of New York and hip hop culture. Amazing individual. He was coming over and kind of checking our set out one day, and after my set I was kind of walking with him, and it's a story because it transitions on how I ended up with a different set of people, because up until that point it was just me and Tabula Rasa boys, like the New Mexican boys, and that was it. We moved as an organism and everything. There was no anything else. But that day in Pomona, I ended up taking a walk with Caves, and we were discussing, just hip hop influences and stuff that brought me into that and what I was interested in. And of course, being a kid of that time frame, House of Pain was something that was big for me, and Everlast was always a big influence for me as a just looking at MCs who were talented, not only because he was a dope MC, but also he transitioned with the solo stuff with Whitey Ford and all that stuff. So I was talking about that, and he just kind of giggled, and he was like, "Well, you know who's walking in front of you right now?" And I was like, "No, what?" He's like, "Yeah, well, this guy that's walking in front of you right now with this tall dude literally walking right in front of us." He's like, "Well, that's Danny Boy from House of Pain." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Danny," and and then Danny turns around and introduces to me, and then, you know, again, long story short, I ended up sitting down on a picnic table with Danny and spending like 2.5 hours just talking about like chopping it up and be kind of becoming friends. And also next to a world famous Japanese artist named Hikaru, who Bounty Killer. And there's he's a famous artist out of Japan who had an amazing line of, stuff, art, dolls, all those guys. But Bounty Killer is one of those iconic members. So it was Bounty Killer, Hikaru, and Danny Boy and myself. And so that was like the first time I met Danny Boy, which would then, spawn me into 8 months later another meeting with I hadn't spoken to him since, and then we ended up, reconvening at my younger brother's recording studio in Melrose, because Danny Boy was looking for a studio that he could record what he was going to basically put together what was he was calling like the underground white boy supergroup of hip hop. You know, it was like, and at the time, which would become La Coca Nostra. And so without going into heavy detail of what that is, basically it was just like it was like all these very well known underground white MCs, Ill Bill, obviously the members of House of Pain. You had DJ Lethal and Everlast in there. Then you had, Ill Bill in there. And then you had these three up and coming underground rappers that Danny Boy had tried to put as a group together, which was Optimist, which is later on would be known as Jordan Towers, Big Left, and Slain. And that was kind of this group that he was trying to create this like, kind of like a lack of better terms, it might sound bad. It's like a white Wu Tang type of
Yeah,
vibe, right?
yeah,
It was
that's what
like
it is.
a crew, a clan, and it was all
Yeah.
successful up and coming cats. Some more up and coming, and then some more established, like the Everlast and Ill Bill. And he was looking for a studio to where he could start doing some stuff because he had some tracks. So he ended up calling around. One thing led to another, and my younger brother got the phone call because we had this studio off Melrose, or he did. And so they ended up coming through, which was this random, like he walked through the door and I was like, yo, remember me? We sat at the picnic table, and that from that day on, it would spark a friendship that I had with Danny Boy. Like on the day I always say, I was like, I was Robin, he was Batman. Like I was kind of like his go-to dude for anything. I would go pick him up, and help him run errands. At the time, he was going through some life stuff that I was helping him out with. And he kind of, you know, put me under his wing, so to speak, and kind of brought me into this LA hip hop scene that I obviously didn't grow up in because I was from New Mexico. So enter in me meeting all of these cats, not only in the hip hop world, but also just the street culture of Los Angeles with, Dom from Brooklyn Projects on Melrose, which was like the gateway to the skateboarding world, which had Muska and all of these different cats that were everybody kind of was like, that was kind of like a rotating place where everybody would come and hang out, right? And meet and greets in these parties and stuff. And then, of course, DJ Lethal and, all these different cats through was this gateway that Danny Boy led me to, right? And so, and of course, I'm like this kid that was like, wow, right? I mean, I grew up in New Mexico, listening to all these cats, and then watching these cats skateboard and all this stuff, and then here I am being just accepted into the fold, because of this beautiful, I mean, Danny Boy just put me under his wing, was like he vouched for me, right? So, and I just kind of got in where I could fit in, and that was again like my entryway into this time period. And it was really beautiful because I got to sit. What I will say this: it was beautiful and also painful, but also those painful parts are what created who I am today and my understanding. And it took a lot later on for me to unpack what went on at those time periods that created maybe some angst at the time, but created who I am today. So, but I was able to go into these rooms and go into these places and view what was going on and meet these people and kind of just start to get my feet into the soil and see myself in a different light other than just the front man to the band Tabula Rasa, and start working behind the scenes and cultivating myself as a solo artist. So
Yeah, and that must have
short
really
short story
sparked.
long.
Yeah, no, that's what we're here for. I love this story. 'Cause I witnessed that from the outside of it all happening, and
Yeah,
then later coming full circle with Lethal and Jordy and that crew through Be Real TV was just kind of a whirlwind or rotation for all of us. We always, even though you were in that experience, I was parallel right there with Real TV thing and Be
yeah.
Real and Nels and Lenny, and so, it was amazing to watch. Would you say that is the when you started to realize like, "Oh, man, I can do this for life," or had you already committed? Because once Tabula Rasa started to live and thin out, did you really, did that put you like, "I'm in there, like, I'm committing my whole life to this," or
Yeah,
did you
I
already
think
have
I
mind
kind of
frame?
I was already there because, like, I truly believed, and it's, again, hindsight, right? The one thing that Tabula Rasa taught me, and I think it's taught all of us, because again, hindsight is like we were we were a great band, and we were ahead of our time as far as what we really were. And there was points that we didn't understand as a band how to, kind of make sure we appealed to the business side of the music. But when it came to like the music side and playing and performing, we were, I think, as good as it got. Like, just as far as our chemistry, right? And so I recognized, and maybe it's just my view of myself, A, as an athlete, and B, then as a frontman, and what I did was like, I'm good at this and I can do this. And I know I have the appeal. I know I have the look. I know I have the skill set, and I definitely have the work ethic and the drive to do this, right? And so I never doubted myself in that sense. So as soon as I made the transition into the solo aspect, there was no doubt. There was a lot of naivety. I mean, I'll tell you that, like, that for
Yeah.
sure. I was naive as hell, and but willing to do whatever it took to a fault to get to that place, right? And I think, this is one thing that I had to do a lot of work on later on in my life here, as I, got to look back and understand, like I was saying, there's some hard lessons that were great educated moments that have brought me to who I am today. But one of those in that key time frame was a big one for me, is that Tabula Rasa was a band that we were I was me, if people know my government name, I always say it's like my name was Matt, and people dubbed me CK because my last name is Kirk. So people called me Captain Kirk. And I never was a Star Trek fan, so I never liked the nickname, but I couldn't run from it. So then it became Captain Kirk. And so that was what I kind of was on the microphone in the band Tabula Rasa, not because I chose it, because that guy, handed, just like nicknames, right? You got to you just serve them up. That's what happens. You got to just get used to it. So then I changed it to CK, and then, the evolution of the name came along. But when I was in the band, there was no thought of like, uh, an alter ego or having to fit myself into something, right? We were who we were. We were very authentic in who we were, and there was no thought about a look or a sound or a manufacturing of a thing or of a product, right? We were just who we were. And so when I left Tabula Rasa, or, we still have never broken up. I will say that 25 years later, we still have not broke up. We just don't play anymore. So like, but when we parted ways and I stayed in LA, I didn't have an identity of as a rapper or as an artist, right? I was just this dude that was in this band that happened to do all this stuff, and I liked everything, sports, surfing, and skating, all this. I didn't look at myself as a character, right? And then I started getting around, usher in this place where Danny Boy brings me into this group of people and all these kind of quote unquote, cats that I looked up to or saw on the screen or saw on music videos, and I'm amongst them, right? And I see how they represent themselves and how the world views them, and how or people around view them, and all this stuff. And I start to recognize the quote unquote characters that people are playing, right? And then the more you hang out with these people, you start to see their authentic self as next to their, let's call it, their representative in the public eye, right? And so it was the first time, and I'm in my, mid to late 20s at this point, and I'm around these people, and I recognize that I didn't have that. Therefore, it kind of made me not show up in the room as like that confident dude, right? Like I was confident in myself, but I didn't know how to express that in a room full of sharks, right? Like when there's a bunch of sharks around, you got to know how to get your food when the chum hits the water, right? And like I was used to this band where everybody's like, "Oh, cool, there's some chum, let's all split it," like,
Yeah.
and that's not how it worked, right? So like, and
Yeah.
so
It's
I
just, yeah, it's a crew, but every man for themselves.
It's dog eat dog, man, and like,
Yes.
understanding, especially in that underground hip hop thing, man, it's battle, right? So like, and
Competitive.
it
Yeah.
and at that time, very different from what I see in the music business these days around the rap, young rappers, is like, it was on the track and off the track, it was dog eat dog, right? And so like, and you had to be very much in that mindset, and that just wasn't who I was on a core level. It's not how I was raised. I was not from a urban environment, street kid that was always out to get sell. Like it's just authentically not who I was. But I understood that to survive in that environment, I had to like get savvy and get quick. And I always tell this. I had to unpack this. I didn't remember this until later, and which was unpacking my traumas, to like really understand why I felt the way I felt about my career up until, not too long ago. And these key moments that I felt defined these major decisions that I made to create these roads that I went down. And one of them was a moment that I actually remembered all the way down to the moment where I made an actual decision to do something to be comfortable in the situation. And the story is I was at DJ Lethal's studio and the whole to La Coca Nostra, they were there. Ill Bill was there, Everlast was there, Big Left, Slain, Optimus, and I think Sick Jackham from Psycho Realm was there that night too. And of course Lethal. And they were, that there was they were producing the beat and they had it, and it was like, okay, we're gonna do this track. And everybody's in the room, in the control room, writing, and at that time, I had yet to kind of like define where I sat in this project. I was like, am I a writer or am I an artist or am I one of these cats that's gonna, be on track? So I'm sitting in the room like, okay, I guess I'm just a writer right now, right? And so in my mind, of course, the person that I'm thinking is the one that I want to vibe with, of course, is Everlast, right? Because I see him, I like that was who I understood. I came from a background of like the singing and the hip hop and like that whole vibe that he had. So I remember I'm sitting there in my head, like kind of writing out this verse and maybe a hook idea, melody idea, and it's kind of in the vein of Everlast, right? So like, because I'm like, okay, and so like I remember you know, walking up to him and he's sitting there in his head. And anybody who knows Eric, he doesn't write anything down. He does it all in his head. He literally writes his verses and memorizes it all. It's nothing, he just literally does it all in his head. So he's sitting there and I kind of come up and I shoulder tap him and I'm like, yo, I got this idea. What do you think? And so he's like, all right, lay it on me. So I start doing it in hindsight, fucking probably not the best thing to do, but I'm like doing it in his demeanor, like the Whitey Ford style, like the sing rap type of shit, like, yeah, cause I'm not knowing if it was going to be for me, but I was almost like, here, man, here's a cool idea for you. Being very naive. And I remember he looked up at me and he went, huh. And then he just swiveled his chair and like turned away and just like went back into his zone. Like it was like, yeah, no. But like, and so it was like, that was a big, for me, because it's like, oh, fuck, like, and so then I sat there and kind of was like, all right, absorbing what was going on in the room. And then everybody started to take their turns in the booth, right? And going in and laying their verses. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do mine when it's my time. I'm going to get in there. And we got all the way to the end of the track. And it was like the kid getting picked for the team, it's like I'm the last
Sitting
one
there.
there and nobody's picking me, right? I'm still standing over there like, oh, cool. I guess I'm not getting on the team. Exactly, right? And so I remember like listening to like everybody's verses and like what their content was, right? Like where they were coming from and like what they were writing about. And I remember I was like, oh, okay, you want that hard shit, you want that thug New York underground, like urban city fucking shit that I grew up listening to, right? That Mob Deep shit, that fucking, that Wu-Tang shit, So I'm like, okay, all right, so that's what you want. And I remember walking out into the hallway and I was like literally like looking at myself through this. There was like a picture frame. I can't remember, but I was like looking at myself through it and I was like, all right, if that's who they want, then that's who I'm going to fucking give them. And so I like created this character in that moment and I sat down and I wrote this verse and and it's probably one of like the gnarliest fucking verses that I've ever written that was like so not me, but so like I'm gonna show them my capability of writing, right? And so I remember I dropped this 16 and like obviously I wasn't, they still weren't letting me in, but I pulled Big Left out into the hallway and I remember I spit the verse for him. He looked at me, he's like, fuck, dog, that's dark, like, and it was like, but I remember it moved him, right? He was like, God damn, right? And I was like, and it was some heavy shit, but it was in that moment that I created like the CK that would then embody that. That was I created my superhero suit right there, right? That gave me this like bravado. I was like, okay,
Or
this is
your
who I'm
villain,
gonna be. 100%. Exactly. My villain. No, for real. Like, not superhero. Cause in hindsight,
Like, I
no, it was
remember
very,
that guy.
very,
I remember that
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
He's a more of a villain.
Yeah, more of a villain for sure. So like that was the moment, and I remember, and I took Matt, let's say Matt, who I was raised as, and the kid that was in Tabula Rasa and this free loving like hip hop joyful shit, and I put him in a box neatly and taped that shit up and slid that motherfucker into the closet and was like, no, I'm that fucking dude. Like I'm CK now, represent, like you want to do this, let's do this. So then from that moment on, that's who showed up anytime I was within that circle because I was like, this is who they like, right? And I remember Danny Boy listening to or watching him react to like the verses that Big Left and Slain and all these guys would he'd be so hyped up. And then like he would just be like, yeah, cool, man. And then I'd end up like, you know, doing some things. And I remember it just changed me, right? And so like I was like, I gotta create this character to survive in this environment, right? To be, and so not that I was faking the funk because what I would say is like I I completely embodied it all in, not 24/7. There wasn't like oh, whenever I see him, I'm gonna put on my character. It was like, no, at that moment I literally taped up who I was,
Yeah, it
stashed it
becomes
away.
yeah, it becomes method. It becomes
100%. Yeah,
your default. Actually it's a survival mechanism,
absolutely.
especially in that type of environment where it is cutthroat, it is competitive, it is top dog. It's a bunch of alphas. If you're not an alpha, you're not going to eat. So it's
Exactly.
and it's got to be exhausting though to live that life, especially because you guys were touring heavy, doing a lot of shows,
Yeah. Yeah.
and keeping up that persona. How long did that last?
So that was like the first intro was like I would say 6 to 8 months of me being like I was saying, like that the underling to Danny Boy and helping him on all facets of that
Yeah,
group. Kind
earning
of
your
he was
keep.
like,
Hey, that's yeah,
yeah, he was
building the
the
trust.
puppet master. He was the puppet master, all of it, like putting it all together, getting everybody in the room. He's such an amazing visionary with marketing and branding, with the logos and creating the merchandise and really getting the hype wheel going with like everybody. We were going to all these different events, getting Warp Japan magazine into it before it was even a thing. Like there was a buzz in Japan about it, right? Like he was Danny Boy is a master at marketing and vision of all that on a grand scale. And I got to watch that too and learn. And so he was really calculated in all these things and putting it all together and then creating the product, which would be La Coca Nostra. And so that was like a 7 to 8 month period. And during that time, it's funny, man, because all these stories come back to these moments where I'm at DJ Lethal's house or I'm at his studio, and then like these these moments in my life happen. So it's so funny. It all comes back to Lee.
It's a
And it's
magical
like, it's so,
place. I've been
yeah,
there.
dude, it's real. It's wild. And I've never been able to sit down with Lethal and actually tell him these, like how it happened. Cause I kind of pieced it together later on. I was like, why did it always end up at Lethal's house? But so then the second time, like the transitional phase happened was I was at Lethal's house in Studio City, and they were all, in there doing tracks and stuff and getting the La Coca thing going on. And I walked into the control room, and there was this dude sitting on the couch. And funny, man, because it's just this moment that I'll never forget. Is like 2 days before that, Danny Boy had given me a bunch of clothes at his house. He's like, "Here, have this, have this," and so I'm wearing this shirt, and it's like the Obey, the way Shepard Fairey did the Obey with Andre the Giant, and it said Obey in the red. So this was the same thing, but it was a picture of this tattooed dude, and it said Ezak underneath instead of
I just put
Obey. And
these.
yeah, and so it's a picture of Lord Ezak, aka Danny Diablo, and it says Ezak on the shirt. And I walk into the studio, and there's this dude sitting on the couch that is Ezak.
It's
It's
him.
Lord
Yeah,
it's him, and I'm wearing the shirt like the biggest like man fan, but I don't
fanboy.
what's funny, bro, is I had no idea who he was. Like I just thought the shirt was cool.
Yeah.
I never knew who Ezak was. That wasn't part of my like I didn't grow up like listening to a lot of that underground New York hardcore stuff. I was more influenced by West Coast hardcore and punk rock because I was in the snowboard and skateboard world, right? So like I listened to a lot of Fear and a lot of, Dead Kennedys and all that kind of stuff that was coming out of the West Coast, being a West Coast kid in New Mexico and looking West with California and skateboarding and snowboarding. So again, naivety like a big dog standing there with his shirt on, but he loved it. So like he's
Yeah.
like, of course he loved it. So like
Yeah.
I
You're his
meet
man.
him,
You're his best friend
yeah,
now.
straight
You're
up,
his
right?
dog.
Straight up. So like and I'm like, oh wow, that's fucking irony. I'm wearing your shirt right now. So I meet him and like must have been like maybe a week later. I'm with Danny Boy and he gets a phone call from Jamie Jasta, which is the singer to the hardcore band out of Connecticut, Hatebreed. And at that time, Jamie was actually managing Ezak. And so Ezak had left New York, had signed a deal with Travis Barker. At the time, Travis Barker had a record label, LaSalle Records, and Ezak had done his first solo hip hop slash what he dubs thugcore record, and it was supposed to go out on LaSalle Records. Again, a little sidetrack story. That label ended up not working out, and then Travis gave Ezak his masters and was like, "Here, man, you just take the masters to the record and go find a label for it." And so Ezak and Jasta found a home for the record at home of the Cottonmouth Kings at the time with Kevin Zinger, Suburban Noise Records. So they were getting that record off the ground and they were about to go out, or Ezak was about to go out on this like 2.5 month tour with some bands that were on Suburban Noise Records that were no, not Cottonmouth, but they were more on their rock end, which was band Head PE and another band out of Southern California at the time, Mower from San Diego. And there was just, it was a 2.5 month tour, and Ezak needed a hype man because his original hype man was from New York and couldn't go on the tour. So Jamie called Danny Boy to ask if he knew anybody that had the ability to do this, the time and the wherewithal to be able to just get on a bus and leave for 2.5 months, probably for no pay, which is exactly what it was, and just rock these shows. Hence me standing right next to Danny Boy at that moment. He looks over to me and he tells Jamie, he's like, "Yeah, I actually have just the dude for you. His name's CK Jones, and I'll put you in contact." And so usher me literally 5 days later showing up at the offices over in Burbank of Cottonmouth Kings and Suburban Noise Records in front of a tour bus. And mind you, this is the first time, even though I'm already like 8 years into the music business, of me ever stepping foot on a Prevost tour bus. Like I've been in vans and
Yeah.
my RV, up until this point. And the dream of having the ability to get in a bus and get in my own bunk and like having that, or like not having to drive to a show was like,
Ain't true.
so, so anyway, I remember arriving, and there's a side story with my relationship with Suburban Noise Records, because that goes all the way back to Tabula Rasa too. So it was this weird moment of coming back, because in the
Full
early
circle.
days, yeah, in the early days of Tabula Rasa, when we first came out to California, we had this manager at the time that was trying to get us signed and get things going. And of course, we were white boys doing like beach hip hop style stuff. We were like more like a hip hop Chili Peppers with a Latino vibe. And so we weren't like your typical SoCal, everybody copying Sublime, which is, the reggae scene that is now so predominant today. Like at that time, it was still fresh. It was 2000. Bradley had only passed away like 4, maybe 5 years ago. So like Pepper was opening for us, which is wild, right? Like I remember Pepper coming over from Hawaii and actually opening for us in San Diego. So anyway, we sent in the stuff, or that manager at the time sent in our records to Suburban Noise Records to try to get a deal. And this is, a side note story, but we had an appointment, a phone conference with Kevin Zinger, who's ran the label at the time and was the manager of Cottonmouth and all them. And he wanted to, speak with all of us, or he wanted to speak with the manager, and we were all sitting there on speakerphone. And when the meeting happened, he basically, and he didn't know obviously that we were all sitting in the room hearing him talk to at that time, our manager, but he was like, "Hey man, you know, cool CD, band's cool. I'm not interested in the band, but I am interested in their front man, their rapper, and I'll sign him." And I remember sitting there like, and it's my best friends, right? We're sitting there. And at the time, like I said, I was all in with my boys. Like it was family. Like that's what I said. A piece of cheesecake hit the floor, we split that four ways. You know what I mean? It was like that was the way. One joint, we each got a puff. You know, it was like that was how it was. And so I wasn't about to take a record deal without my boys. Hindsight, my best friend who's the drummer who was there in that moment, he was like, to this day, we're both like, man, you should have taken that deal and then just made us the house band. Like it just called it CK Jones. And then, but we didn't know that at the time. So that was my first intro to Kevin Zinger, as years before this moment. And then down the line, of course, so I turned down a record deal with Suburban Noise Records, and then he went out and actually, like, I think a couple days later, signed Big B, which would then be this person that comes into my life down the road that I tour with and is like still a close friend, right? There's like, but was in the same thing because he left a band called 187 and signed the deal. And he left his
Yeah.
band and I didn't leave my band. So like, and so anyway, that's a side story. So here I am years later showing up at Suburban Noise Records to then be the hype man for this cat, Danny Diablo, Lord Ezek, and getting on the bus. Mind you, I had only met or talked to Ezek that day in Lethal's studio with his shirt on. Like that was it. That was my only understanding of him at all. And then he was like, "Now you're going to be on this tour bus for the next 2.5 months, going around the country with him as his hype man, and you got to learn his music." So I remember I got sent like 6 songs and on the night before. And so I'm like listening to it. I never heard it before. Right. And so and the first show, irony, bro, the launch pad right here in Albuquerque, New Mexico is the first
Damn.
show. So which is the venue that I grew up playing in with my band. So I know the owner, Joe Anderson. Like I know everybody. I'm like, holy shit. Okay, the first kickoff is going to be in the home city that I'm from. So I remember I spent the entire time from LA all the way to Albuquerque with headphones on, learning these songs, right? The Flavor Flav points of the song, so I could be the ultimate hype man, right? And so luckily everything ran behind that night and Ezak didn't get to perform. So we got the night off. The first night we didn't end up performing. So I just hung out, which was totally okay with me because like I got to say hi to all the family and everybody, Joe and everybody at the venue. But it was like, yeah, we ain't performing tonight, which is probably better because then I had another full day to learn the songs. So long story short, again, this is gonna be a short story long all night, but it's we ended up doing that 2.5 months on the road and I became the ultimate hype man for Ezak. And Ezak is an icon in as a personality in the New York hardcore scene, dating back to the late 80s and the early 90s with his early bands, which is Crown of Thorns and then Scarhead and the entire DMS crew and like everything that was New York hardcore and all the people that are affiliated with that whole family. Again, my naivety to it 100%. Like, was I understanding of what it truly is and what it was and what it represented? Absolutely not. What I saw was like all of these iconic underground music legends that were all like this brotherhood that I was like, yo, this is dope. This is a bunch of musicians that all like hang out together and like they're all bands and they love each other and they're like a brotherhood. That's how I saw it, right? Like, so I was like, that's crazy that I'm hanging out with these people. Cause over time, hanging out with Ezak on this first tour, the amount of people that were showing up to these shows to show love to him because it's his first foray going out as a solo artist outside of these legendary bands that he was in. It was wild. Then of course we're on road with Head PE, which is a lot. They've done really well as a career over time, and then these other bands. So it was a very well done tour. We're playing big venues, all over the country and playing thousands of people a night. So that was my intro into this next sector of people, right? That were all still within this organism of that I started to meet through Danny Boy. And so yeah, with that I spent the entire summer on the road all the way until the fall playing, countless shows with Ezak. And through that, obviously meeting more and more people within the music business that were affiliated through Ezak and Danny Diablo's world, and all the people in New York City, and then all those hardcore bands, all the way from the Cro-Mags to John Joseph to Tim and Lars from Rancid, and I mean, you name it, man. It was just like all of a sudden I went from this kid living in New Mexico with this band to like being a part of this brotherhood of all these legends that I grew up listening to, right? Like Rancid was like
Yeah, you
when
got
I
to
was
skip.
yeah,
Yeah, you got to skip a bunch of levels. I get that cheat code.
sent. Dude,
Yeah,
no, I just like jumped the bridge, right? And I landed on the other side, having being validated by these iconic legends that had done the work. And again, hindsight looking back, it was like this. I don't know how I got there, right? Like it was just one of those things. I know how I got there in the sense is like my work ethic, my talent, and my ability to show up at all times was
loyalty,
like, yeah,
discipline.
100%,
Yeah,
100%, which is, the more you hang out in that sea of people, you realize there's not a lot of that. There's some talented motherfuckers, and there's some dudes that's like, but to have all of it show up all the time is rare, right? And be selfless in the sense of like, at being able to show up and not be like, I'm that dude, it's all about me, right? So I was able to be the ultimate Flavor Flav to Ezak, which then made him comfortable to bring me into his family. And like, in the long term, reality really lean on me to like, because he knew that I was going to show up and always make sure that he was represented in the way that he wanted to see himself being represented, right? And like I made sure that's my job. I'm going to show up 110%, and I'm going to be the best version of this person that he needed me to be. Again, because of that reality that those people grew up in and lived in and who they are, that dude that I created that night at Lethal Studio, just that suit got more and more comfortable to wear. You know what I mean? It was like, I was like,
this is working. Oh, this is working for me.
dude,
I got some
the more
juice.
and
I got some
more it's
sauce.
exactly, the more and
Yeah.
more I was wearing that villain suit, the more and more I had dudes coming up in the massage and show and be like, "Oh, you dope, dog." Like getting all that validation that I saw Danny Boy and all those guys giving these up and coming rappers that I was also trying to be in part of that night. Like the more and more I got that validation from these people, the more and more I was this character, right? And so like again, so you just keep feeding the beast. And what wolf do you it's that whole story of the two wolves, right? It's like what wolf do you feed, right? So it's like I was feeding that wolf. And when you talk about the energy drain, or like how much it takes out of you to do that, like that's the thing that I wasn't aware of at the time, but it slowly started to creep over time, is like the emotional toll that it takes on your inner self, your subconscious self, when you're not actually being true to who you actually are, right? And so you're having to represent and then being viewed. And this is one that thing I say is like people like talk about the difference between Hollywood actors and then or like musicians and rock stars. I was like, the world knows that an actor is playing a role. So when they leave that movie role, they're like, oh, you played a dope role. But they go home. So there's always, it's like the Heath Ledger thing. He couldn't let the role go, right? So it's like, but like they can differentiate. So the person viewing the celebrity is like, oh, they're an amazing actor. But with rock stars, it's like, you don't get looked at like that,
Yeah, hear
like you
that?
don't, or at least you didn't. I think it's different these days. Everybody seems to like be okay with creating rap characters and like not actually being that character, right? And everybody's kind of okay with it. But in that era, hip hop was like if you didn't represent and really truly who you were getting called out. So like again, it was like I really was making sure that I, in the words and the terminology we used at the time, was demonstrating my style, right? Like I made a commitment to that role, and I played that role full time 24/7. I lived that role. I demonstrated that style. It became who I was. There was no other me. But on an internal emotional level, something was stirring over time, right? And because outside of the music, there's a lifestyle that you live and a way that people view you that you have never met before. Where it first started to really that thing I just said really started to pay its rear its head with me was yeah, we did Ezak, after like a year and a half of or 2 years of touring with him and his solo stuff, got asked to bring um his one of his hardcore bands back and basically do a record and release a Scarhead record. And so Ezak agreed to do it with the label, but he asked if I would be one of the singers on the project. And at the time, there was another singer in the band called Puerto Rican Mike. May he rest in peace. He passed away this past year. But he was the one of the original MCs on the vocalists in the band. And so Ezak wanted to transition Mike me to transition into Mike. And so
Oh, yeah.
the first tour we did, Mike was on the tour and we did a European tour and it was the three of us on stage. And then Mike would then get ushered out and then I would just take over and it would be me and Ezak. And that, so originally we did the tour to kind of sizzle up the hype that Scarhead was back. And then after that tour, we went to New York and we were there for about a month to record this record, which was, Drugs, Music, and Sex, which was the rebirth of Scarhead. And when I was there, living in Queens with Ezak and kind of just being immersed in this culture that he grew up in, right? And we were doing the record in the studio, and once again, it was one of these moments where I was like, okay, I'm representing a band and their message. And I remember when it was my time to like write to the music, 'cause this is like one of these moments in my life that is just so visceral and like stained in my memory. I'm standing in the lobby of the studio and Donnie D110, who is the manager of Scarhead and Ezak at the time, and Ezak are standing there and Ezak pulls out a paper plate, one of those like disposable paper plates with the little rings around it, and he gets a marker and he writes down 10 song names, like the titles of the song names. And he's like, all right, you're gonna do your vocals tomorrow. And mind you, like I'm just hearing these songs, like you're just laid down the tracks in the studio, and it's all, it's heavy hardcore shit. And they're like, all right, these are the song titles. And then I'm like, okay, so what do you want me to write? And verbatim, bro, this was like verbatim what they said to me. They're like, all right, this is Scarhead. So think about the worst, craziest, absolute gnarliest shit you could ever say and times it by 10. And that's Scarhead. And I was like, okay. And like, and like some of the names on the song names were like pole swinging pigs and, fuck the scene. And like, so I remember I took the paper plate and I folded it up and I like stuffed it in my pocket. And it's like the winter in New York City. And my boy, DJ Apocalypse, big shout out, was living out in Long Island. And I took the train from Queens all the way out to Long Island to spend the evening with him. And then I take the train back the next day to track my vocals. So I'm on the train, the Long Island, and looking at these song names, and I start to go, okay, how am I going to do this? Right? Like enter in me creating these lyrical parts. And I literally just was like, all right, I'm going to become Ezak and I'm going to write this as if I was Ezak, right? Like, cause then I have this entire catalog of 2.5 years of firsthand witness to this person, and that's authentically his band and his group and everything that he is. So that is the perfect person to embody to write this music, right? And that's one thing I know I have a gift for as a writer is like I can truly take myself out almost to a fault. Like we'll get to this part in a bit, is like that's been a biggest detriment to me is the more and more I've done this with all these different artists and the different kind of stuff, I've lost track of who the hell I was,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
truthfully as an artist,
yeah.
because I'm so busy becoming all these
Emulating and
other.
making them look amazing.
Yeah, exactly, and, like, losing a piece of truly who I am, and, like so anyway, I write this stuff, and then, like which is out of control, bro. I mean, the record is dope as hell, and when I listen to it, I'm like, "We killed it." Like, the record is dope, and it was, the people loved it around the world, but I remember the next day I recorded all the vocals, and I was leaving the studio, and I called my mom, and my mom was like, "So how did it go?" And I was like, "Mom, I'm never gonna let you hear these songs." That was literally what I told her. I was like, "You're never ever gonna hear this because like what I just wrote, like you can't ever hear what I just wrote and recorded." And so there's just such a visceral moment those 2 days of like how it was. But that was it, right? Like I was told not what to write, but basically what to write, right? Like it was like, this is what you're going to do. So it was not go be you and show up on the track tomorrow. It was go be Scarhead and show up. And again, to the strength of Isaac and Danny, he trusted that I could do that, right? That I wasn't gonna fuck his brand up. He knew that I had the talent and the understanding to go do exactly what I did. Oh, and if you pick apart now knowing that story and knowing the character that I wrote as, if you listen to what I wrote on that record, you will absolutely understand. Like, oh shit, yeah, he's fucking Isaac. That's me embodying Ezak, and then Ezak does Ezak, So it's like, that's why and it was, again, I had 2.5 years of being on the road every
Like
day,
you're
being with
soaking it
him.
in, every nuance, every nook and
Sponge.
cranny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, and again, so that was this next chapter of me being in that world, which is now me coming from tabula rasa into the underground hip hop world of like the House of Pains and the Ill Bills and nonfictions and like Sick Jackins, like Cypress with the Be Reals and all those guys. And then all of a sudden getting pushed into this New York hardcore scene, which was then, interestingly enough, they were very tied together, underground rap, New York rap, and underground New York hip hop, and even West Coast for certain matter, very integrated. And so I went from this one hip hop thing and then migrated into traditional New York hardcore, right? And so like I was doing that. Meanwhile, at the same time, still trying to be an artist, right? Like still trying to be CK, and like and of course my younger brother is a producer. He's doing hip hop music, super talented and working with all these artists, and his lady at the time, Runway Star, who's done like they're doing these great records with these people like Demrick and JR from the group Third Story. So they're doing a lot of urban like R&B and like hip hop stuff, traditional like, working with these cats. And then here I am over with like this super intense street cultured hardcore rap hip hop stuff. Um and so again, I'm wearing this suit and around these people, and this is how people are viewing me. So I start to like make these records that are like they're dope, but it's like so far off of like who truly I am as a person. So like the villain was creating these tracks. And again, I listened back to it. I'm like, yo, it's dope. Like I'm a great writer, and not to toot my own horn, but like realizing how good I was to, create this character and actually authentically show up within the suit, in authentically within that
Yeah.
context, not authentically me, but like the writing was dope, the tracks were dope, but I am now pushing my younger brother into this world of like
Yeah.
craziness.
Create
He's
something from
having
me
to,
that fits my persona now.
yeah, 100%. He's got to absorb it and deal with it and then like make these tracks, and he's having to do songs with people that I know he would have never wanted to do songs with, but he's like, because he's my brother, he's doing it. So there's that going on, at the same time. And then where I was going to, where it first started to like show up internally with me, is that we did that the drugs, music, sex record that I did with Scarhead, and then we immediately hit the road to tour the thing around the world, and like we did over a year straight of touring where I only came home for about 2 weeks, and we did multiple European runs, we did U.S. runs, and we did Canada, and it was like we're going all over the place, and again, hardcore music isn't it isn't this rock star lavish tour buses and like catering and arenas and none of
Grind.
that, man. It's vans and it's sleeping on people's floors and like playing VFW halls and like
Fucking tabula rasa, baby.
bro, straight up 100%. And now I'm doing it with all these dudes that I didn't grow up with, that I'm like trying to fit in with, that are like legit street cats that grew up in the streets of all these urban environments, right? And they're authentically who they are, and like salt of the earth people, man. Like all craziness aside, amazing human beings with their stories, right? So like I wouldn't change it for anything now in hindsight, but like I got to just like experience this wild ride, but again, not truly accepting myself in the mirror as far as like who I was. I think the one thing about me is that I wasn't so fake that people were like, "Who is this fake fuck?" Because I'm always going to be me, and that's why I created genuine friendships with people. Everyone knew on a level of a deep level that I was a good person. That's why everybody confided in me to like do the work, right? So it wasn't that I was like coming off like a fake fuck. It was
No,
just
yeah.
more that I in the music and in the context of what it wasn't my message. You know what I mean? So like, but these cats were authentically amazing. But as we got these tours deeper, it's like it really set in when I went to Europe for the first time. And I get off into go into these venues and these people are coming up to me and they're like that I've never met that are like viewing me as the person that they're hearing in the lyrics on this record, right? And so they're going, we're the same person
Yeah, yeah.
because they're identifying themselves in that verse as, as they do. And then I'm having to sit there and absorb that going, man, this person is literally viewing me as this character, not who I really am. And it was the first time I like felt it, right? Like it was like that doesn't feel good, like it doesn't feel good that they think I'm somebody else and that this is like a genuine moment for them to
Yeah,
like
and
meet
yeah, they've been living this false
100%.
reality and perception of who you are. It's like a
100%.
wrestling actor or a wrestler, a bad guy or
Totally.
a heel, and they
Yeah.
think he's this piece of shit,
100%.
and they
100 that's a
believe it, and they're like, "I would do the same thing. Fuck this and fuck that. We're the
exactly.
same, bro."
Dude, that's a perfect analogy, perfect analogy. So it's very
Yeah,
WWE, but I'm from the WWF
yeah,
era.
right.
So yeah, like that's a perfect analogy. And that I remember that was like when it first started to like sink in. And that was like in 2010. And I had been like just relentlessly living this life and touring with Ezak for years at this point and like being a part of this culture and everything and on in this internal level it was starting to eat up at me and I remember one of the moments where it was kind of like I always say like if you're not true to yourself and you're not living in the skin that you should be in your body will start to actually and so I remember I came back from tour and I was living in Arizona at the time and I was living with this girl who mutual that we both know, Kana. And like I remember coming back to the apartment that we had and I was at the time I was rocking like a mohawk fade, like I had a fade with a mohawk and I would braid it sometimes. But I remember I'd been on the road so it had grown in a little bit so I was like, "Oh, can you touch up the hair?" And she starts buzzing me and she's like, "Yo, did somebody play a trick on you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Well, you have a bald spot on the back of your head." And I'm like, "What do you mean a bald spot on the back of my head?" Mind you, I'm 30 years old at this point. And there is no balding in my family like anywhere, right? Like so like everybody's got hair all the way Pops is 81 and still got hair. So I'm like, "What do you mean a bald spot?" She's like, "You have like a giant spot missing hair on your head." And I was like, "What the hell?" And I look in the mirror and turns out alopecia. And like again, there's no alopecia in my lineage at all, like anywhere. Like I looked into it, right? And so like I'm going, what is this? And then I was also during that time getting crazy bouts of like eczema and which again I'm super I was health conscious, obviously partied, don't get me wrong, partied, young, doing it, but like at the same time, like clean,
Yeah,
like
you know what you're putting in
did
your body.
yeah, and so, like, I'm like, eczema, like, why am I getting skin conditions? Like, what's going on, right? Like, later in hindsight, it's like I wasn't comfortable in my own skin.
Stress,
So
yeah,
my
stress.
body was stressed and, like, my body
You're
literally my
rejecting
skin
yourself. You're
exactly,
rejecting
like,
yourself.
exactly. I was, like, trying to be a snake, right? It was just
Yeah.
trying to, like, shed this skin. So these signals were coming up, and that's, like, the first time that I was like, "Okay, like, I'm not I'm not doing the right thing in my career of music, right? And so that was and here we are, like, that's brings us into 2010. I had been grinding nonstop since, 1999, 2000, starting with the Tabula Rasa band and moving out and, like, just for a decade straight, just get in where you can fit in. First, it was get in where you can fit in with the band all the way up until 2005. And for the next 5 years, it was get in where you can fit in with all these different crews of all these different people. And me doing it by myself with all these people that, I didn't know. I didn't grow up with. So it was like I was just this yeah, I was it was wild, man. I was like the first 5 years I had my team, my roll dogs. I grew up with them. It was like every weird one all for one, one for all. Then all of a sudden it was just like I'm by myself. And I created the character to save myself to be
That's the hero's journey. You know,
100%.
the
You know,
warrior journey. You're the last man standing. Did what you had to do it's a great movie actually.
yeah.
To do what you had to do to evolve as an artist and to be in the scene and earn your chops and earn the respect to and at the same time play a villain, but at the same time you have to almost get into that dark place as an artist and be able to go there so that because music is not all sunshine and rainbows and most of the music that people are attracted to and being in that dark place is what keeps them from doing anything crazy.
Yeah. No, real.
And I think that dipping into that for you and being an athlete and be disciplined and strong and have mental fortitude to be able to push through that and still be adding to your character, knowing that that's not who you are. And that's a lot of development as well, knowing who you are not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where did that and you know that you mentioned that having these realization moments. Was there in 10 years straight of touring and grinding and doing whatever it takes, sacrificing everything? I'm sure holidays, weddings, funerals, birthdays, family gatherings to live this life. Where did you get a break? And when you started to get the eczema and the balding, was there a point where you said, "Let me take a time out and heal"?
So, well, I mean, it kind of like it like threw itself at me. It's like what you just said there, dude. I always say, dude, I've missed everybody's important day in my entire life. Like every wedding, every childbirth, every family member's birthday, every funeral, everything. Like literally my entire career, like I can tell you maybe 2 or 3 times that I've made an event of a family or a friend in the 25 years because it was always something that I was doing on the road to make it, right? Like literally I've missed every important day of everybody's life that I grew up with. And that's just the sacrifice that I've lived. You know, a lot of the time it's tough, you know, it to like look back at that and realize, you know, there's a country song I heard the girl says, I missed my grandfather's funeral for some one-off show in Tupelo, and I can never get that one back. And it's like, and it's true because it's like at the time that show, you're like, oh, this person's
Most
gonna
important
show
thing.
up and I'm gonna get signed. But then it just became that bar show that fucking 5 people showed up to, and you got drunk and went home and cried yourself to bed in the hotel room. It's like that. And then meanwhile you missed the funeral. So like that resonated when I heard that line. So but to go back to what you said is like, did I have the time off? So in that moment, of course, going, oh my God, I'm like fucking balding. I got created this skin issue and all this stuff. I'm clearly stressed out and not being true to myself. That's when it started, but I was still in it, right? And then we went back out on the road for another, man, it was like six months. And I remember everybody in the group was like, you know, itching because it was just it was a rough run, right? There was just we were out forever, and it was not again. And we're in hotel rooms. It's like fucking in Europe, man. It's crazy. Like the shows would be cool, like a roller coaster. Some would be like oddball, crazy place towns in Germany that would be like wild, and then you'd sleep in some crazy hostel in some weird bunk beds, and it was like you're just like, whoa, what is my life? And then you'd get to somewhere like play a show in Paris. Like my last show in Europe with Scarhead was playing at this real famous music hall, like venue theater in Paris. And we were the headliners and it was sold out, bro. It was like 1,500 people. There's a video online of it. It's like, that's my last memory of my European tour on this tour, which is crazy. So it was a beautiful way to leave in my head because I can go back and see that and remember. I remember where I was mentally. So in the moment, it was just another night that I was trying to cope. But like looking back, I was like, that was a great show, right? Like there's a lot, it was fucking cool. But I also remember in those moments, I started to really realize that I wasn't happy, right? And so, and there's, without getting into it, I will say that there's a part of this that's an important integer to bring in, but it doesn't need to be talked about really, is that there was a lifestyle that was being lived outside of the music that was a part of what I was involved in, that I was completely immersed and involved in, let if you put it that way, like affiliated. And that affiliation was more important than the music in the group, in the crew that I was representing, right? And so worldwide. So there was a lot of importance on that representation, if you will, and it was very stressful and very intense. And some people thrive in it. Some people, I'm a very empathic person, so it was hard for me to compartmentalize the all the emotions of that kind of environment,
Mhm.
and then also, like I said, demonstrate my style and be show up and represent. And so what I had to do in that time, and this is off stage stuff, how I had to represent is I had to become as secure and confident in myself physically to represent physically as I could. So I remember I put on a lot of weight, a lot of
So you
muscle,
were
and I became, I
you were
swelled up and I
Greasel, yeah,
became, yeah, and I became like very
enforcer.
conscious of, yeah, how to represent myself, in situations that would occur, and so we'll just put it that way. But that also on an underlying level was stressful, and so like knowing that at any moment shit could pop off, right? And so like, and that was like all the time on the road. Like it was like before shows, after shows, it was like constant and it was around the world too, right? So it was like there was a understanding there that at all time you had to be on guard, right? And so like and be about it, because if you weren't about it, then you weren't about it. It's like you represent or you'll get reprimanded for no representation. So like so I made sure that I represented at all time, and I hold that to my cores, and everybody knows that. Like no matter what, how I felt on the inside didn't matter, because when the moment came, I represented. And I there was no questions asked. And so when that was going on in this final little chapter of me being on the road and just feeling so stressed out about it, I recognized that there was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm done doing this hardcore stuff now. Let's say the thing that I was affiliated with outside of the music, I never thought that that was something that I was going to be able to not be affiliated with, if you know what I mean. So like I was like that was a decision that happened to me that I a little bit of naivety walked into, not really understanding, and it's just a decision that is a lifelong decision, that it is what it is, right? And I'm going to have to live with that. But the higher powers that be, and the heavenly angels, they have a way of bringing you in a wild way, and also if you need to be extracted at the same time. Everything is in divine interaction and course. So I truly believe that, because that's basically what happened with me. So but I at the time I was like, I'm done with hardcore music and this thing that I was doing with Ezak. I was like, it's just not for me. So I was like, I remember we had played some shows in Europe. We came through Canada. We came back into the United States, and we played a show in Kansas City. And that was it. That was the show that I was like, all right, I'm done. After the show, they all went out and partied, and I laid on the couch backstage at this venue until they all came back. And then we were driving back to there was a friend's house that we were all staying at, because he lived there and he was part of like the inner crew. And I pulled Zach outside, and I was just like, I'm done, dude. I can't do this anymore. And understandably, he didn't take it well, and he basically, told me to get my bags and kick fucking rocks at that moment at 3 in the morning in Kansas City. And so long story short, I found there was a girl that had a house nearby, and I ended up sleeping on her couch until about 6 in the morning. And then I took a cab to the airport, and my parents at the time were living in Phoenix. And so I caught a plane to Phoenix, and for the next year, I just kind of like hid out, right? And just kind of like disappeared. And kind of it was the first moment where, like you're saying, take a break. It was like the break, it happened whether I wanted it or not, right? It was like, all right, I made a decision that night to quit that band, not knowing that it would quit everything. And in that moment, because of that, like I said, divine intervention came through. And not only was I, um, you know, subtracted from the band. I was subtracted from that entire environment and culture and people that I had been around for the last 5 years. And it was a heavy blow in the sense that it wasn't just, okay, cool. Now you're not touring in this band and hanging out with these people. It was like, I got blackballed because
Yeah,
of that decision.
you're blacked out. No contacts.
Everybody,
Yeah,
all those people that I had hung out with for 5 years, all these people that were the iconic people in the music business that I, had all their phone numbers, and at the time, I'll be on record and say it right now, I had started working on a whole record with Tim Armstrong from Rancid for a solo record, right? And I had been in the studio with him. Those phone calls went dead. Like, all of it, everything was like, nobody, it was like I was done. I was blackballed from making that decision. And so there I was, starting over, with none of the numbers in my phone to be able to call. And I remember it was a real humbling moment for me, but it was also,
thank
again, in
God.
hindsight,
Thank
soup.
God.
Yeah,
Thank
for
God.
real. Like real. Because it brought me to this next 10 years of my music career. And it's wild because I'm only now in this story, we're only 10 years in, and I have a whole nother decade of wild shit that occurred that on a much grander scale as far as like notoriety and the things that came from me, making that decision in the middle of the night that was super hard and that, was tough. Cause one thing I was going to say with that is I remember being on stage with the hardcore stuff and going, there's some kid in his bedroom right now that would love to be in the shoes that I'm in right now, who's like lives, breathes, and dies hardcore music. He would love to stand next to Isaac every night and do this, and it would be the dream for him. And here I am listening to John Mayer backstage and Love Break Heartfare War, like or Heartbreak Warfare, and like just dreaming to not be there, right? And I'm like, I need to step away from this to allow that person to be able to come fill those shoes. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing that person a disservice by not allowing the room for them to come, whoever they are, and I'm doing myself a disservice to allow myself to grow. And so and that was a tough decision to make because, again, I mean, if you subtract all of my own personal stuff, I was traveling the world, playing to thousands of people, like living the quote unquote rock star
Mm,
dream in a
yeah.
certain sense, right? Like, of course, was I
Empty
on
inside.
private jet? Yeah. Was I on private jets? No. Was I like staying in chalets and no. But I was traveling the world, playing to thousands of people and playing music for a living and getting, paid enough to where my bills were getting paid, right? So like and getting loved for it. That's amazing, right? People dream about that. So in that sense, it was like to step away from that, it was like, okay, I really got to know what I'm stepping away from. And so anyway, to fast forward, then here I am in Phoenix. And at the time, my younger brother had gone through his, maturation in his music career. And then my older brother moved out to Los Angeles to go to MMI, the Musicians Institute, or MI, excuse me. And so then he's there living with my younger brother now in a different house, not on Bloomfield anymore, but living over in Burbank at a house. And
I was there.
yeah, you remember. And so he had his studio there at this point. He was working on records with cats like Demrick, Young D, who now is, is a writer and works with, Exhibit and Be Real and all those cats. And so he was doing a solo project with him along with his lady who in that same time frame produced Teach Me How to Dougie with, Cali Swag District and Trinidad James and, all that stuff. So they were doing their thing, popping off. And I was like, I need a place to live. So I moved to that house and I started sleeping on my older brother's. He was living in the back room. I started sleeping on the couch in his bedroom. And then when I got a bed in the corner and I was like, and this is funny because these shades that are right behind me right now, I bought
Yeah.
at that time to put around the bed in the
To block
corner
off from
to
him.
block. That was my bedroom. It was these Japanese shades that are literally these ones behind me because I brought them here to New Mexico. My mom uses them, so like it's hysterical because I'm looking at them right now, telling the story, going, oh, these were around my bed. So like, I bought them from a little Chinese shop over in Burbank. Um, so yeah, and I started writing songs like outside of this villain. Like I started to like express myself in a different way. And a little side note to that too, and it's like long-winded, but when I was in Europe with Scarhead, I got to play a couple of shows with a band out of Canada by the name of Alexis on Fire. And Alexis on Fire has a guitar player and a singer and a songwriter in that group. They're a hardcore, post-hardcore type of group out of us of Canada, Toronto area. His name's Dallas Green, and Dallas Green also has his group called City in Color. He also has a group with Pink, the singer Pink. This is a duo, and they're You Plus Me. He's an amazing songwriter, and at the time, I got to watch him backstage, and he would be with his acoustic guitar, and he'd be playing these amazing like singer songwriter folk like beautiful songs, right? And like meanwhile, they're going out on stage and crushing it with their hardcore shit. But then he would be doing these songs, and that was what was his solo project, which he called City in Color, because his name is Dallas Green, and city being Dallas, color being green. And he just didn't want to call his solo project Dallas Green. So anyway, that was the first time I like got to see somebody in the world that I was in. That was this, I call it the testosterone filled world of music, being vulnerable, right? And writing these vulnerable songs that was kind of tapped into something else. And I remember that. So when I moved in to my brother's house onto his couch, and I like for the first time got a guitar, because I never played really an instrument. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna write some songs and tap into this place that I had never tapped into. And so I started doing that. And within a month of me doing that, I wrote this song, which would then become this song, My Life, while living on, the couch. And you know, I started, perfecting the song, and my younger brother heard me playing it. He was like, "Oh, that's dope, man. We gotta work on that." So we went into, he had the studio at the house. So we went in, and at the time I had the verses, I had the little pre-hook stuff, but I didn't have it all worked out. And I had the chords and stuff. And then we went in there, and I just ended up, while tracking stuff, he was like, you need something in this section. And then he was like, just spitball something with a melody or something. And then I ended up, finishing the hook with the My Life run, which and it was like, we got it, right? And I was like, oh, dope. This is a dope song. And I was like, this could be my first single. And like, so this was the song that was gonna be the rebrand of CK Jones, and like this, let's call it quote unquote, the first time me being authentically me. It was like uplifting message about my journey to that point, and it was gonna be my song. So I remember we shot a music video to it, like, and I had it kind of ready, and I was continuing to write songs and do stuff like that. And this is where enter in Big B, the one that with Suburban Noise Records and stuff. I had met Big B on and off over the years, and kind of befriended him. He's very keyed in with his best friend is Carrie Hart. I love motocross and dirt bikes, and B is always kind of hand in hand with that world with Carrie and all the freestyle motocross guys and Twitch. And so I was always, kind of hanging out, and B knew that. And he always like would throw me a bone. If he had a show, he would let me open, and I would do little things with him. So, and at that time, he knew that I was trying to get back out with this new thing that I had going on. And so there was this group from Australia, Bliss and Esso, coming over to the US to do a US tour that he was going to be the opening act on. And he was like, "Hey man, you should hit up their manager. This is his info, and see if you can be like the opener, right? Like the first opener on these
Yeah.
on these shows." He's like, "I think it'd be a good look for you. Like, it's some positive hip hop type of stuff. I think their crowd, their fan base would do good." That's what I did, and I ended up getting on some shows. First show being the Roxy in Old Town Scottsdale. So I that was my first foray into getting on stage as the new and improved, or the new real me at the time, who I thought was real me. Because again, this evolution of figuring myself out has been this wild ride that's taken me 20 years, 20 more than 20 years to really realize. But yeah, that was after a year of, like what you said, hitting the pause button and kind of recreating myself. That's when this next chapter started. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's wild. So, but yeah,
And then
man.
that song ended up going crazy, right? Because they picked
Yeah.
it up and,
Yeah.
and remixed it, right? And
Yeah, I mean, not really remixed. I mean, basically what happened, it was like,
they took
I
it.
so yeah, well, they didn't take it. I mean, we could get into the semantics. That was a lot. That was a learning lesson, but yes. But I ended up playing some shows with them, and that song, as I said, I had a music video, I had it ready to like release as my debut single, and I would play that song at the end of the show. That was my closing song, right?
Closer.
And the first night, that night in Scottsdale, I played the song, and I'm playing in front of a crowd that had never heard me, didn't know my name, and didn't hear it, had never heard the song. And by the end of the song, the whole crowd was singing the hook. And like that was like that's when we knew it was like, oh shit, we got something. And then the next night in Riverside, California, same thing. And then the next night at the Roxy, the next night was actually Eureka, California, again. And I was like, and I remember like, and B was like, yo, you should see if you can buy on to this tour because they were going up into Canada. And like, and he's like, you should see if you can buy on. Again, most people think you just get on tours. Most of the time you buy onto these tours because you got to pay for shit. So I ended up paying them, I think it was like $3,500 to buy into the tour, to be the opening act, really like the first person that goes on stage at night, unless there was like a local before me, right? But I'm like the first traveling opening act. So I buy on and I get my bunk on the on the bus, which is dope. I'm like this again, being on a Prevo, bro, is like that's luxury, bro. So like coming from where I'm even at that age at this point, I'm like, 31, like, whoo, I made it, right? Like I don't care what I pay. I was like, so anyway, I'm on the bus, we're doing these shows, and that's how I'm doing it. I'm closing the night out with that song. And it's having that same reaction. About a week into the tour, we get up into Canada, we play in Vancouver at this club, Fortune Sound, and I
Been
even have
there.
a video. Yeah, I even have a video of it, and like sold out. I played the song. By the end of the fucking song, the whole crowd is just singing the chorus without the music and everything. And I'm like, it's dope, right? You can feel it. And so then I come off stage and Bliss and Esso, and then Big B was going on next. So he goes on stage and I'm sitting backstage. Mind you, I'm sitting backstage, which is cool because in hindsight, I'm in the room with cats like Mercules, who's now blown up from Canada. Mercules is a dope underground MC, but he's like young at this point, like this is 2012, 2011, and so like he's coming up, Evil Ebenezer, all these cats that are out of Canada, these up and coming like hip hop cats are all sitting backstage. So it was cool, man. In hindsight, I remember like the cats that were in the room. Bliss and Esso kind of pulled me aside and they're like, yo, that song's really dope. And mind you, it was about to release like 2 days later. Like the video, I was supposed to drop it because I was out on tour and I was like, this is the time, right? And so they pulled me aside and they're like, hey, that song's really dope. We're about to work on our fifth record, and we would really love if we could, get that song from you. And we'd like you to stay on the chorus as the featured artist, but we would like to then we'll rewrite raps, we'll put our verses on the song, but then we can release it on our fifth up and coming record.
Yeah.
And anybody that knows, at that level, like they, especially at that time, they're still really massive. Like at that time there was like two Aussie hip hop groups. It's called Aussie hip hop, right? Australian hip hop groups that were like as big as Lil Wayne in the US was. Basically Bliss and Esso and Hilltop Hoods.
They were it.
That was it, right? It was like, and so to have a song with Bliss and Esso like that is like a guarantee moment of exposure. It's like you'd be a fool to not do it, right? And so I was like, of course, right? And like I had already within a week really sparked up a friendship, great cats. We were on a level, right? And so then we made the agreement. I didn't release the song. I, shelved the video and everything. Obviously continued to play the song on the set for the rest of the tour because it was like a week and a half more because I needed the music and they were cool with that. And then from there, after the tour was over, I went back to LA and Nigel and we sent the files. We took all the Pro Tools files and the whole thing and we sent it to Australia. They went back home and they started to record this record, which wouldn't come out. And then the song came out in 2012 on their album Circus in the Sky. And again, long story short, with that, it's like still to this day, one of the largest successful songs they've ever had. It is now 2 times platinum. And then it shot up the charts right as the record released, and I went and then spent most of 2013 and 2014 in Australia. We did the largest hip hop tour in Australian history. Played I mean shit, it was crazy the amount of
I
thousands
remember.
and thousands of people. And the first time I ever performed in Australia, I got off the plane and it was the ARIA Awards, which is live on it's like the Grammys of Australia. And it's like 3.4 million viewers, live viewers on TV. We performed the song on the ARIA Awards live. And that was my intro to Australia was 3.4 million people live, at the ARIA Awards. And then we did every TV show, the Today Show, the Footy Show, like everything in Australia you could do, we did it over this time period, playing to massive shows and crowds. And so at the success, I went from like what I told you over the last first 10 years of my career to then living on my brother's couch to then I was flying around in planes and then fucking staying in these hotel rooms and like getting condos and like living in Australia in these. And then I had a condo for like months living in there, just touring out of Sydney, flying to these events. And like, it was wild, man. Like literally having a guitar tech. There's like somebody walking over and putting my guitar over my head and like line
So
checking
done.
all my shit. Like I went from like sleeping under somebody's floor covered in cat hair, like eating whatever I could eat
Um,
and like fighting and like, crazy parties to like that life that everybody dreams about, right? As a musician, and when you think about the rock star life, right? Like the backstage and the catering and the whole nine, man, the lines. And it was this wild thing where it was a transition that happened where I was like sleeping on my brother's couch. And so like that that moved into that. Now, here's this wild caveat that, and like, especially in hip hop, right, with the rapping and stuff, is like I developed a character and a style, and like, and it was like, so when I sat down to write, like, especially hip hop, was like, it was hard to break away from that. I also grew up loving Wu Tang and loving those groups, right? So definitely when I'm like making that was like it felt good, right? In a certain way. It stroked my ego. Let's just put it that way. So then I start writing these other songs, but then and I have this success with this My Life song where I'm singing the hook and I'm playing an acoustic guitar. Now, when I wrote the track, I'm also rapping these verses, but they didn't use the raps, right? They put their raps in. So I on the song am a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar singing, which is not what I've ever seen myself as ever, right? Like so and then boom, I blow up somewhere in the world, across the world from me in Australia. And I head over there, and every same thing that happened to me with the Scarhead thing, I show up in Australia and get introduced to 3.5 million people live on TV as like an Ed Sheeran.
yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to say that, it's like, but that's literally
But
what
in
people
that
are like,
way,
oh
it
yeah,
represents so it's like acoustic
yeah,
to
he's
ki
a cool,
yeah. So
totally.
they think you got this whole catalog of shit just like that.
Yeah, yeah. So everybody expects that's what I sound like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's this wild thing happening because, one thing that I'll touch on too is that I didn't know who I was, and I was at that time, I was really searching for a sound, right? And again, I'm like a Swiss Army knife of styles and sounds and like and all my blades are sharp, right? You want a hardcore track? Got you. You want an underground hip hop track? Got you. You want some Stony Beach, rock, stoner, Cottonmouth King stuff? Got you. It's like I did it all. So then but in doing that, I didn't know how to create all those sounds into one sound that felt like me. So I was compartmentalized. So then every time I'd go into the studio, I would end up with one of these songs, but in one lane. It was it was nothing that was
Yeah,
like this.
you were just a chameleon and it just had no
100%.
continuity. There was
Yeah,
no continuity.
100%. And like even in the tone of my voice, it was like one song you'd be like, wait, that's you? It wasn't
Yeah,
like, oh,
I
that's
did.
you
Yeah.
with that kind of music. It was like even the voice inflection would be different, right? So like and then so I went to Australia and had this moment in like the grandest of spotlights, right? Like as big as it gets as far as a spotlight on me. And at that moment, I really didn't know who the hell I was as an artist, right? Because I'm like schizophrenic with my past, still dealing with my ego around that. So on stage, I've got that hip hop bravado. And then I get this moment. So I go out on this tour we're talking about, and they give me an opportunity to be one of the main opening artists. not only do I get to be their guitar player, and I so on their tour they created a full band to like back them on stage for this crazy production, which is like amazing. Our stage drop, we had a the DJ had a VW bus converted into a turntables that like drove onto the stage. I mean, it was as crazy rock star as it got. And I got to be the main guitar player during their show. So I was on stage with them. And then at the end of the night, the encore would be My Life because it became their big single. So then I would step forward at the end of the night and
Yeah.
perform front stage center with them. But the whole set, I was their guitar player and vocalist in the background. So, but before their set, I played an opening set. So I was on the bill at CK Jones. And bro, my set, if you could think about the most schizophrenic jambalaya of like musical context you could ever imagine. Like, again, I know looking back, people were like, that was one of the dopest shows I've ever seen because you were so, everything was so different in your energy. And I was like, performing at this level. I was crazy, dude. I created outfits and like, I came with it, like with as much as I could come with it as a showman. I came with a showman. But what I also understood is that you hit the word. There was no continuity it was a great show,
Yeah, but you were
but
throwing
that was
shit
the
at the wall.
100%. And like if you took my show and then put it on a disc and just tried to listen to it, you'd be like, what the fuck am I listening to? Right? Like, is this like five different artists? Like that. Did I just watch the whole night of music? Like,
Yeah,
so that was
you're
kind
like an open format DJ just
totally exactly for real, for real. So that was what was going on. And I didn't, again, in that moment, I was still wrestling with this confidence of like, oh yeah, this is who I am. Like I'm 100% me. I can do whatever I want. You should just understand that I'm all these things. But on hindsight, coming back to a business view of it, it's like this rewinds me to a moment that was very pivotal with DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill prior to this, and I remember it was with Young D, and he was telling a story, and Muggs stopped in the middle, and he goes, when you listen, he's like, you can't get a clientele hooked on Snickers bars, and then when they're all hooked on Snickers bars, and all of a sudden one day you decide to put a Milky Way in the Snicker bar wrapper and send it out without telling anybody to that whole Snickers community of your clientele, and you don't tell them, they're gonna be like, "What the fuck is this?" And they're gonna be mad. And if the next one is the Milky Way and it still has a Snickers wrapper on it, they're gonna move on to the next Snicker bar manufacturer because that's their taste that you brought them to.
you
And
developed.
and 100%. And he's like, when you hear a DJ Muggs beat, you know who the fuck it is. It's DJ Muggs because that's what I do. And they want my shit, and I keep feeding them. Now, when I heard that at that time, that made me mad, bro, because I was like, fuck that. Artists should be able to paint whatever they want to paint. And if you're a fan, you should just like them for who they are. Now, there's some beautifulness in that thought, but as a business, I understand what he was saying, right? It's like, keep it simple, understand that this is a business. And if you want to have longevity in a business, you've got to understand who your clientele is and make sure that your clientele remains happy. And so, like, so it took me a long fucking time to understand that, man. Like years I would remember
Some of
that
that's probably the
story.
best that's probably some of the best advice that you ignored. We
100%.
all
Oh,
have
yeah.
that. And then looking
Oh,
back
dude.
on it, you can only connect
Oh,
the dots looking backwards.
100%. Oh, yeah, 100%. Dude, I got some great ones of those. I have another one from Linda Perry, bro, from Four Non Blondes, bro, that was like at a strip club. She laid it on me. And I remember when she laid it on me, I was like, bitch. And like years later on Twitter, like, I had realized she just dropped the knowledge like,
Yeah.
years later, and then on Twitter, she asked, I remember this is a great story, side note, she on Twitter was like, "Have I ever met you? And if I met you, can you tell me what did I say anything that was impactful?" And I fucking tweeted her back this story, and it was like, dot, 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 "Oh my god, I can't believe I said that to you. I'm so sorry." And I went, that was you dropped the knowledge. I was like, it was actually one of the most pivotal moments in my career. Like, actually, it was when I was making the transition from Tabula Rasa into this, solo stuff. So anyway, fast forward from that. So yeah, I was fighting to figure out who I was as an artist. Meantime, in the moment of, I truly believe moments continue to show up, you know, and in your life where you can capitalize on the moment. And if you're ready, it happens. If you're not ready, you'll learn,
It's
you
so
know.
soon.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, and so that in this moment, even though I was in the biggest of spotlights that could have absolutely catapulted me to this level of, let's just call it fame and stardom in the music world as myself, I had no continuity or understanding who I was as self. So it wasn't my time. What it was a giant moment for me to stand in the doorway and take it in and learn to see what it was like to go, okay, do you really want it? Because
Yeah,
this is what it's
it was a
like.
dose. He gave you a good dose, a sample dose.
100%,
Yeah,
100%, 100%. It was just a taste, just the tip.
yeah.
And it was like, and then it was like, now, yeah. And it was like, okay, now you know what it is. Now you've got to figure out who you are. And so I came off of this crazy uh like year and a half from, pretty much the end of like from 2012, the end of 2014. I should like 2 years with Bliss and Essa, multiple tours and stuff. And then going, okay, now I come back from Australia, and I remember the final show was in Hobart, Tasmania, and I remember, like, standing on stage, and it's sold out sea of people, and I'm singing My Life, to the crowd for the final time, knowing that that was the last show, right? And I was flying home to the US 2 days later, and I remember saying to myself, like, looking out over the crowd with the microphone in front of me singing, going, "Take this in, because you don't know if this is ever gonna be like this again," right? Like, yeah, I remember, like, taking a moment to really, like, take the visual in so I can when I sit down and visualize and manifest, you can be there because it's real important to like visualize through your POV, not you from
As
afar
if,
doing it.
yeah, as
Yeah.
if first person.
Yeah. First person. Exactly. And that's another topic we could talk about. Is like I've had to understand a lot of my time visualizing. I was always seeing myself doing it, not actually seeing
As
myself doing
yourself.
it, if that makes sense. I was always the person in the backup singer watching myself up in the front of the stage. And that's not how it works manifestation wise, like, and understanding to switch that view. It took me a long time to understand that too.
Well, it
But
also took you a long time to figure out who that guy out there standing in front is.
100%. Yeah,
Truly, you
really,
can't be
for
that
real.
guy until you release that mask and expose yourself. It's funny to mention that your biggest success was when you were the most vulnerable,
Yeah.
right?
Living on my brother's couch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the song that you expressed your lowest point became your highest moment.
Yeah, yeah, and then gave the song away and let this is in a weird little, this is where this, like, the kind of the again comes back to, like, my view of self-worth, and let's call it my traumas, is, like, I watched then this song that myself and my family, my brother created, that I then, you know, gave to another artist or artists, have it blow up and everybody go, "Their song is so dope. It's so cool that you were on it." And it's like, "Oh, well, actually," like, if you really wanna get down to the brass tacks, it's like, I let them be on it, and it's
Because
my
yeah,
song, right?
but
It's
you didn't feel the self-worthiness
100.
of
Not at
having
all.
it. Yeah,
Not at all. No, and no, and so, but, and again, so I took a lot of that over years for me, like, took time of, like, I had a lot of angst around that, like, the and so it was, and there was some stuff I learned a lot in the business. We'll just keep it at that. Is like, there are some business things that went down that were unfortunate. That track, like I said, is double platinum. It's done really well. Having the platinum record on the wall doesn't mean I have the platinum bank account, and we'll just keep it at that. It's like, so, and I learned a lot in that sense, and learned about how the business works, and what you should do in these moments and not trust in people's, and so things like that. Oh, again, valuable lesson, which is also led into that angst that I had around it because of, like, things that happened between me, and then obviously how my brother, what happened to him around it as the producer and things like that, and just seeing the success that came from it and the amount of money that was generated from it that didn't generate into our family accounts.
yeah. Sure.
But, over time, I had the plaque on the wall, which is rad to have to look at, but I remember for years I would look at it and it would make me mad. It would bring back all of the angst, the shit that I needed to process that I wasn't really ready to process, and also understand to find the gratitude in, and really understand the value of the lesson that that provided, the experience in life that it provided. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the money. Money comes and goes, but those core memories, the experience that came from that is priceless, and very few people get to have the experience that I had with that, right? And so that's worth more money than anything. It was this beautiful thing, and I have now, in having done the work around it all, it's like I have such gratitude about that experience because it was a beautiful thing that I got to experience. So
And that is what's going to be the catapult. That attitude of gratitude is going to be the catapult into the next phase of your
yes.
authenticity. Because to be perfectly honest with you, that angst and that negative vibration that it was given you through that feeling of that song was actually stifling you from creating it again and living in that realm because of the negative frequency that you're on through that. But the trick is to, like you said, flip your mindset and your perception of it, as the universe gave you a dose. You know that you're capable. But you have to stop resisting your transparency and your vulnerability, because as an artist, the greatest artists share their darkest, deepest, heartfelt, most honest truth. And that's what connects people and attracts people to your message. And I think that going through all that, and all that masking and villainy and suffering and angst and anxiety and trauma is unleashed now into the artist that you have developed into today.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has. And it's like, and again, it's funny because now we've only gone into like to 2015, man. And here we are
Right.
into
We're
like
still got a decade.
that's so wild, bro. It's like we were talking 2-hour podcast, bro. This might be like,
It's
we
not,
could
it
go
ain't no
deep.
joke.
I,
We're
I,
crushing. We're crushing the 2 hour mark. I feel like David Goggins. We don't quit when we're tired. We quit when we're done.
Yeah, so it's like, but and just to go there, it's like it's really the truth is like understanding that, and you're right, so right, and I feel like especially the artists that have authenticity and that can transition through like timelines and generations of music as an artist and still be relevant and also maintain a truth within their sound, right? It's like yeah, yeah, great, age gracefully within the music, right? And so, and I had to like find that, and through all this stuff that is created the fodder and the content in which I have become as a writer, right? And like, and it's funny because all of this living through this Hollywood era time of this heavy production and these bands with big production, and then the hip hop world of all production, and then these massive shows and all this stuff. And then to summarize where it ended up is like, then I came back from Australia. I was like, I got to figure out who I am. And I started experimenting with sounds. And funny enough, it just kept getting digressed more,
Strip
less
down,
and less, and
stripping,
stripped more
layers.
and more. And
Yeah.
then I found myself just with an acoustic guitar singing, being this type that technically in Australia they were like, oh, he's this singer songwriter with a guitar. Is kind of funny because it was like I was kind of moving the needle that way anyway. I just didn't understand it yet.
Well, you know what it did? You know what it did, CK, is that it's exposed to you what will happen when you get to your truth in your core. This is what is available to you if we can peel away all the layers of who you're not and get
Yeah.
down to the nitty gritty of who you are. This is the life that awaits for you.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah. And that analogy, I was always like, it's like if you've ever ridden horses, is like if you ever get lost with a horse, just let go of the reins because the horse knows where home is. And it's like,
Yeah.
or and you'll end up where you're supposed to be. Or like I always say too, is like, my this has felt like my career in the music business is like I'm really strong and fit so I can paddle, even though I've been sitting in a river trying to paddle upstream in not my river. But the minute you get into your river, your current, you don't need a paddle. It's
It's
going to
effortless.
take you ever exactly. It's like when you ever as a creator, you get into a moment and you just all of a sudden you arrive with a song, or I'm sure with a DJ set, it's like you don't even realize time happened, right? Like it's like it just you're in your current and it just like it flows because that's where you're supposed to be. That's the most pure state, right? And so I've been like spending a lot of my time learning by paddling upstream, thinking that it's my river, right? Like this is my freaking river. This is where I'm supposed to be, and it's supposed to be this hard. But no, it's not. Like, but but you learn a lot and you gain a lot of strength and ability paddling upstream and doing that. But then that moment where you can finally realize you're like, oh, I just got to let go of the reins because I give up, I surrender.
Surrounded.
And so I just, I'm going to let the powers, the higher power to like, I just need to be open up and awake enough to like recognize when the time is presenting itself, right? And like not try to force it, just allow it to come. So that's been like the journey since 2015 and going through different phases of sound. And then there was a period, and this is like little quick, synapse in my career because I came to a point where because of how I viewed myself and my past with my name, CK Jones, it was the same right around the same time, 2016, that Spotify and all these digital streaming platforms were starting to really basically take over. And I found myself getting caught in these algorithmic loops that were only feeding this music that I was doing, which was not my past, which my name, other than the My Life song, was very much tied to this underground hardcore and underground rap stuff. These songs that I were doing where I wasn't even rapping anymore. I was doing some soul music and I was doing some country music and I was doing all these different things and experimenting sonically. And I put this record out under CK Jones. And it was, like I said, the turning point of digital music taking out, it was no longer CDs, it was algorithmically steered digital streaming. And it all basically the algorithm just saw my name and went, okay, you're an underground rapper, hardcore artist. These songs are this. And they would only feed these songs to those old school listeners that listened to that old school stuff. And granted, like if I was somebody that listened to nonfiction or Scarhead or any of these like La Coca Nostra and stuff, and I was like and the algorithm stuck one of these songs that I was doing in my playlist and it came up, I'd be like, what the fuck is this shit? Skip, right? Like, don't play that ever again, right? Like, that's not
Do you
my
like
jam. And so, yeah, and so like, but that's what was happening, right? And then if you saw me live, I would go play these songs. And I always say it's funny because I had like a song called Good Coffee, which is like a love affair to coffee. Cause I love, it's like, but it's almost damn near like a Folgers ad, dude, it's super corny, right? Like, but it's a cool little jam, like soul, Alan Stone type of vibe, like, and like all about coffee. And like, if you went and saw me live and you're like a woman and you're like freaking 35 with your kids and stuff, super user friendly song. You're like, oh, I love that song. And then they're like, well, great. I'm going to type you
Let
into
me
my
go home and look them
Spotify
up.
account. Yeah. They're like, I'm gonna put you in Spotify, save that song, and then so they have CK Jones in their algorithm all of a sudden. And so then they're sitting at morning coffee listening to my song Good Coffee, and then the algorithm goes, oh, you like CK Jones? Then you're gonna like Necro,
You're gonna
blah blah
love
blah.
this.
I love it. Exactly. And then like shit comes on, like, that's like death, die, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And they're like, oh my God, don't ever play that again. And
yeah.
so that was what was happening with my music. I ended up getting on a phone, and this is crazy because at this time, like you can't do this anymore, but it was right in the early eras of time of Spotify. I actually got on a phone conference with the people at Spotify and was like, yo, this is what's going on. And they were like, yeah, that, we've heard this problem before, but that's not a big enough problem for us to solve right now. Our algorithms are working just fine. Hence they are, because look at them today. But like, but they were like, our recommendation to you is either have your fan base add your new songs to as many playlists as possible and override our algorithm, or change your name. And so at that moment, I didn't have a fan base enough to override an algorithm, right? The only algorithm that was being overridden is these fan base that were all these hardcore hip hop listeners. So if anything, it was doing it. It was just taking it to the place I didn't want it. So I was like, I got to change my name. So after, 18 years, in the music business, decided that I was going to walk away from the name CK Jones and start over under a new name, which my government name is Matthew Kirk. And I was like, I always saw Matthew Kirk on my passport and government documents backwards. You see your last name first, first name last. And I was like, and I always saw it and I was like, oh, that's cool. Kirk Cameron. There was all these Kirks that were like, oh, that's a dope first name. It's my last name. So I was like, fuck it, Kirk Matthews. So that's literally how fast it went. It was just like, I was like, cool, call me that. So we did that. And I put out for between 2019 and 2022, I put out some records as Kirk Matthews, and it was very much singer-songwriter, Americana, folk moving into country. It's like a lane that I kind of went back into my childhood. I have these very like visceral moments of my childhood with country music that, I kind of suppressed as a teenager. But it's funny enough, like the songs come on and I'm like, I know every goddamn lyric of Randy Travis. Like I know all these songs. I don't know why, but it's like a deep part of my childhood, right? And so yeah, I started to really express myself in that realm as a songwriter and really just go into that realm and really study the John Prines and the Chris Christophersons and all these like major songwriters of that time and of our generation. And kind of put those songs out like that. And then in 2022, this is where life for the first time overrode the
Artist?
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that it was the first time in since 2000 that I saw that I was so not happy still chasing the dream that I needed to see what life was like outside of just that, right? Like, can I be happy just being Matt Kirk and maybe just having a normal job like everyone else and maybe having a relationship because none of my relationships worked because again, it's like it's always secondary, right?
More to the music.
Yeah, so it was like I was like and I because I recognized I was playing gigs and driving, I was like by myself, just gig to gig, playing in restaurants and picking and grinning as a singer-songwriter and like not happy. There was nothing fulfilling. I would come off stage and just be depressed. And it was like the only time I was happy was like when I closed my eyes and sat there and played the music, but as soon as I like opened my eyes and like step off stage, it was like self-deprecating, like it was like wasn't, it's like meanwhile people are like for the first time, people are looking at me as this amazing musician, not just like this rapper personality, but people are like, wow, man, you have an amazing voice, you got your guitar playing and all this stuff. But I was so far gone already that it was just like I need a break. So yeah, in 2022, at the time, to be 100% honest with you, I quit the music business and I quit music and I wasn't gonna come back to music. Like I was like, I was done. And I was like, during the COVID year of 2020, obviously as a working musician, all that stopped, well, is like and the working musicians were looked at as like the last thing to be taken care of as far as getting the check in the mail, the
Yeah.
free money or whatever. So I was sitting here going, okay, what am I going to do? And again, it comes back to my love of motorcycles. I just, a friend was like, "Hey man, we're building flat track bikes. We're gonna just go ride our Harleys at the flat tracks and stuff." I was super into motocross racing, love that, but like never was into that like the world of Harley Davidsons or stuff like that. I mean, I like the bikes, but I was never like into flat track racing or anything. But they were like, "This is what we're gonna do," and I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna figure out how to buy a jalopy bike and work on a
Cement.
bike and build it up, right?" That's what I did. I ended up finding this, clapped out Sportster and I would just sit in the garage ripping it apart and like I ended up building my first like custom Harley, like that, turned out to not be the best bike for a flat track bike. So it turned out to just be this weird off-road, Steve McQueen
Yeah.
Harley thing. Like, but it like ignited this thing that for the first time I found myself sitting in the garage and losing track of time just like I did with music, right? I was like, "Oh my god, damn, it's 2 in the morning. I've been out here and I'm like immersed in this thing that I'm actually love to do." And which was just like create with my hands and work with the motorcycle and envision something. So I was like, maybe this is something that I want to do, It's like, and so as I was moving the next, couple of years, like I said, with the music, it was starting to get more and more hard on me. And I had the moment was I had talked about moving to Arizona and going to the MMI Motorcycle Institute at Universal Tech and like becoming a real mechanic and the whole nine, like learning how to do it the proper way and getting a technician's degree and stuff. And so I dabbled with it, but I was never like whatever. And I had kind of inquired at one point and sent my email address in. And I remember I was driving to Denver to play a show by myself, and I was literally I had gotten engaged and over that last year, so right around COVID, right when COVID happened, I started dating this girl that I had known forever. And then through COVID, obviously, it was like fast forward your relationship, it's like everything got compounded into fast forward. So by the end of it that year, like we ended up getting engaged, and I was like, my life was like in a different place, right? But that started to fizzle away during those 21, 22, and then in 22 we split, long story short. And I was like, and then my music was falling apart as far as like I wasn't feeling good about the music, even though I was like doing these things. So I was just done, right? And I remember I was driving to Denver and I was it's a from Albuquerque to Denver, it's a 5.5 hour drive. I was crying the entire way. Like literally physically by myself crying going to this show and just a wreck. And I was like, just there was so much emotion that I couldn't keep it in anymore. And I remember I'm like driving between Colorado Springs and Denver, and I get a phone call, and it's Motorcycle Mechanics Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. And they're like, hey, we got your email. We saw that you're interested in coming to school here, and we'd like to offer you a full ride, and we'll do this, this, and this. And they're like, but we really would like to fill this enrollment with this. Can you be here? It was like June 6th. And mind you, it was like May 2nd. And like, and I was like driving to this show, and I'm like, and I literally was like, literally had to like wipe the tear. I was like a wreck. And so like, I literally wiped the tear. I get on the phone and I just said yes. I said yes. And I was like, and that was it. And at night, I played this show in Denver, and this woman had set up the show. And I'm like, I'm not going to say her name. I won't out her, but like she set this show up, and she was like super, a fan and all this. And like the venue was a beautiful venue, and it was like and like, of course, she took me home and was like totally throwing herself at me. And I was like a wreck. I said no, slept in this bedroom by myself. Like she had like, and she was like totally like, what is happening
Right.
right
Like, I've
now? Like,
never denied. You didn't
yeah,
deny.
yeah,
Just
dude,
threw
like
you. I
everything.
paid you to perform and throw a show, and you're not gonna.
Yeah,
What
dude,
is
like
wrong with
I'm
you?
like,
You got like pussy?
exactly. I'm not, exactly straight up. Like it was like a
Or are you
rewind, like
gay?
yeah, it's straight up. It was like that for real. It was like normally it would be like, this is exactly what you want to happen, bro. Like they do all the work. You show up there,
Yeah,
like here you
everything
go.
you
You're like,
dreamed of is
yeah, yeah.
happening, but you don't want it.
I'm like over here, like I'm done. I'm done. And so so anyway, so I get up, I play that show, and I'm like, that's it. That was my last show. And I drove back to New Mexico, back to Albuquerque, and I told my parents, I told everybody, I was like, I'm leaving. And my younger brother had moved from LA to Vegas and then to Arizona, and he had a little guest house. He was like, you can live here. I walked away from the music business, and I enrolled in school, and then I went to school and I until I graduated, and it was awesome because for the first time I I was a part of the social media revolution. I was one of the original beta testers for Instagram back in 2009. I was one of the first 1,000 people on the app. And I remember it was just Japanese kids and me. And like I remember I've watched the entire evolution of what Instagram was and what it turned
Into
social media into.
yeah,
And so like so I reckon, and even before that, the Facebook, before that, MySpace. And like, I recognize that I have been a part of social media in my life every single day since 2003, and like, and it was like, it was a part. And then, so that moment when I disconnected from the music business, I disconnected from all of it. I erased my Instagram page, which funny story in that I found out that you can't delete your account. They still have it. And like so like I learned that one. So like I thought I deleted all of my social media and like moved to Arizona as Matt Kirk, and I went to school, and when I enrolled I never told anybody who I was or what I did before that. I was
Civilian witness
yeah,
protection program.
100%. Totally. It was full on, dude, like a witness protection program. Like Fredo, I'm like, I'm that dude in his 40s that decided to go back to school to become a mechanic. And yes, surrounded by these 19-year-old kids, bro, that were like, what the fuck's up, old man? Like, bro, I got treated like the old man, like, dude, it was like I didn't know shit. Like I spent like the whole time their kids were like, okay, yeah, cool, bro. Like, cool story, old man. And like, but it was so good for me to just let all that go and like not have any stories, but like my cool guy stories or any of that, and just meet people as normal person. Like I have these
Yeah, on a
salt of the
ground,
ice
on an equal playing ground.
straight up, dude. I met these guys that I still talk to every day that are just like the most random ragtag dudes that I would have never met before that are like, one oil fucking dude worked in oil rigs and then became a fucking mechanic is like the most random hodgepodge group of guys that I met at tech school. And like it changed my view of everything. And then of course, because music is just in me, man. It started to see I graduated and I'm like, Harley Davidson, I went through their whole University of Harley Davidson and all that stuff, and they were courting me to work, either actually with the company or then take a job, at a dealership and work through that if I wanted to become a tech that way or actually work with the company and do like branding and stuff. And then I just didn't see myself there, of course. I'm an artist, so I was just like, I'm not the dude that's gonna be the mechanic in some other owner's shop, right? Like, if anything, I'm gonna make my own bikes and I'm gonna become somebody with that. That was like what I thought, right? And then after I graduated, I started, music just kind of slowly started coming back in. Somebody offered me a gig and I was sitting with it and I went, you know what, man, if I'm going to do this, I came back here to New Mexico. I opened up my storage unit, which I had all my shit in, like my recording equipment, everything. And I just had this fucking giant bin of like CK Jones merchandise and thousands of CDs and like stage backdrops. And I'm sitting here and going, if I'm going to do this music thing, I invested 18 years into a brand that was this, and that is who I am. I was like, and so is Kirk Matthews, but that was just like a left turn to try to smoke screen something. I was like, I truly am CK Jones. So if I'm gonna go back there, I'm going back out on stage as CK Jones, and I'm gonna play all my music and I'm gonna be totally okay with it. Like, like I've let go of the whole like what I need to be, what people need to see me as. I was like, I'm gonna enjoy my story, I'm gonna tell my story just like I'm doing tonight, but in more of an Arlo Guthrie way between the songs. And I'm gonna do it in a stripped back way with my acoustic guitar. But if I'm gonna do a rap song and I'm gonna explain why I wrote the song and where I was in my life when I wrote it, and I'm gonna do it in my way, but it's all gonna be this. And that's where it's music came back to me, in 2023, end of 23. And then since then, man, I've just literally been picking and grinning, enjoying my motorcycle thing and just enjoying music however it comes. There's not this place that I'm like, I'm again that quote unquote I'm gonna make it. It's like I've thrown my hands up with that, but I'm gonna continue to create, I'm gonna continue to perform. I enjoy for the first time, I'm at peace sitting on the stool, whether I'm sitting in a bar or a restaurant or a venue on stage in front of thousands of people or one person. I've found the joy in what it is for me. It's my church, and like I recognize when I left it, there was a void that wasn't there. And anytime I went to it, it gave me the fulfillment of like what church is for people, right? That it's my connection to source. And through letting all of the other stuff go, and just understanding what it is that I have with it, then it became this beautiful thing where I can just let go of everything else outside. And it's like I equate it to like a surfer on a wave. It's like nothing else exists but when you're in that moment on the wave, right? And for me, when I'm sitting there and I'm just playing my songs and just in it, nothing else exists. So I'm connected to source. And so like that's where I recognize that I've gotten to with it. In the past, there was so much ego on stage. I wasn't thinking about source. I was just like, how am I going to make you think I'm the coolest? Right. And
Right.
so it's
How am
like,
I gonna
you
win
know,
you over? Yeah. How am I gonna make
yeah, let me take my
what can
shirt
I
off.
do? What trick can I
Yeah.
do to get you to love me forever?
Exactly, right? How
Yeah,
can I
but,
sell
you
this?
know,
And so
but the best
yeah,
relationships are when the people know your truth and it's unconditional love. I mean, think about your parents. They see you go through all these stages of pro athlete,
bless them.
musician, rapper, touring, pain in the ass, into this grown man that's now, taking care of your family, what I mean, hands on. So it's just I love that you have on the search for authenticity found it through the person you thought you were trying to be, because you are all those pieces are you, not fully, but we all have to
Yeah,
have multiple pieces of us. But when you can put them together as a souffle or as a gumbo, I mean, that's where all
yep,
the flavor is. It
yeah,
takes all of these years of marination and combining flavors in order to become the artist that you are, as it does become the man that you are, the person, the human being that you are. You have to go through heartbreak, you have to go through betrayal, you have to go through everything, anger, regrets, in order to come to source, like you mentioned, come to source of who you are, what makes you tick, what gives you joy, what gives you peace. And at the end of the day, putting all those things together to be your true authentic self. And
absolutely.
that's where the artistry thrives. I mean, the best artists share their are open vessels to their experience. And I think that now you've already shown that you can heat that's where the success you've been successful as you can be, but there's so much more to be. Do you see yourself are you just along for the ride, like you said, as in flow, or you know I look at people like Post Malone and Jelly Roll that have kind of had the similar type of experience of artistry and finding that truth. And as soon as they expose the truth, that's when the rockets get put on your back, you know?
I mean, I'm at a place where like I'm never gonna say no, I won't do that, right? Like, the jelly rolls a great example, because I remember like, dude, I remember in 2009, 2008, Big B, like I knew about Little White.
Yeah.
Jelly Roll was opening for Little White. Little White was the dude from Memphis. It was like representing, right? That whole crew. And I remember when Big B showed me Jelly Roll, and then to see what he's turned into, and now to see that he's like the media darling at the tip of the spear as big as the machine gets, right? He's the judge on America's Got Talent right now or
Right.
something like that.
Similar
Really, like
journey
he
though.
like,
Similar journey.
yeah,
He was
no, eh,
rapping and in the
yeah, no,
underground
he's
scene.
all the way to like literally the level of like what Beyonce and Jay-Z and all them like, that level of the machine, right? He's okay with it. Like I don't I can't sit here and say I would never do that because I'm not in that position to make that decision. Now, do I see myself is that what I'm aspiring to get to? No, that's not I'm not going to bed at night visualizing myself in that, like, realm anymore. It goes back to that, like, define success, like, my definition of success, that's not my visualization, but I'm not gonna sit here and say, "Hell no" to that.
Yeah.
Whatever
If
the
it
universe
happens, yeah.
Exactly, right? Like that's how I know that for me success is that, I'm doing what I love to do and that having people show up to enjoy it and I inspire people through what I'm doing and my story, that's success. Of course, paying the bills and living a life of comfort into where I can do that every day. That's a beautiful thing and that's success to me. Everything else on top of that is just more beautiful. But to answer your question and whereas I like see myself going is like I'm really, again, I've for the first time am comfortable with who I am and like truly know who I am as an artist when somebody and I can confidently say that and each time I show up that person is who shows up, right? That I'm not trying to fit myself to the night, to the format like I was in the past, and like, come out with which blade out of the Swiss Army. It's like it's all there, it's all me. I'm comfortable with what it is, and I'm comfortable, like I said, whether it's one person listening or if it's 100,000 people, like I'm okay. I'm have a blessed career that I've had these 25 years. It's such a blessing, and I'm so and like the attitude of gratitude is huge. I've done a lot of work on that. And I've also, because of my journey of stepping outside the music and found peace outside of it, I'm totally comfortable and at peace with the fact that there's more to life than just making it as the musician, right? So, like, one thing I will say is like that's different about my journey is because of it. I'm now in a great relationship, but up until like a couple years ago, like I didn't have any, working relationships that worked out. I don't have any kids. Like I'm 47 years old. Like I have a different life than most people my age do. I have this ability, I have this amazing time freedom because of it to still choose me and do the things that I want to do. So I have also found other things, and not to go in depth on it, but like I've fallen in love not only with motorcycles, but I've also fallen in love with endurance sports and triathletes. And like I'm training for Ironmans and doing like that for me. Like I've found this whole output physic. I've come back to the athletics in my life, which I've always loved because it's who I am. And I've like learned to that's the other thing that I didn't understand that was a piece that was a big eye opener for me is the whole time I was in the music industry until I stepped away, I was treating it because my music career, like I said, when we started this, music found me. I didn't find music. I was still a professional athlete when I started in that band, and I never retired mentally. So when I went into the band, I treated the music business like it was a sport and like I was trying to win, and I've never let that go until I left the music business and realized that a lot of the reason that I was so much of a chameleon was because as an athlete, you're always trying to figure out what's the new best way to be on top, right? It's like, what's the new training techniques? What's the new like, what's the new stuff to make you the best? So in the music was like, what's the new hot music that I got to incorporate into my sound to be the, I was like, and I didn't understand that I was doing that. And so like, so I was not in it because that's an inherent part of me as an athlete, as somebody that's very competitive in that sense. So I've found an avenue in my life to do that outside of my art, my creativity, which it shouldn't be in there, right? It's not a contest, it's a expression of beautiful self and love. And like, and so, but there's also something totally cool about athletics and sport and competition and human pushing the human boundaries physically. And I love that. And I found it somewhere else that feeds me. So I have this balance, right? So I've found happiness outside the music. I've in stuff that I can do that fulfills this inner burning desire that I've had. And then I also don't have to bring that into the music, which that has allowed me to find peace within the music. And again, going back, letting that authentic me show up because it's not about me trying to prove to you that I'm the best at it. So,
For sure.
and that brings us to current, bro.
Yeah. But today.
So yeah, and I've got new music, I've over the end of this year, I did what all the kids are doing these days, everybody's doing. It's like trying to put out a song a month. So for the last 5 months of this last year up until New Year, I put out a song a month, and I've got a couple more that I'm working on some mixes, and then of course as we spoke about earlier, I've got some personal family stuff happening, so I've hit the pause button on recording and stuff, but I have songs in the work, and I'm just going to continue to do that. Is record some music, continue to put it out in this way, and then as things grow, just continue to do it, man. And that's kind of the process of it all, and make sure I continue to make it fun and happy and enjoyable and not try to get caught up with the, no pun intended, Joneses.
Right. Well, I think that at this time, it's perfect time. It's absolute perfect timing because where the music scene is at and the next trends that are going to catch fire are stripped away simple things.
Yeah.
You saw at the Grammys Bieber up there in his underwear with a guitar and a sampler and a
I did
keyboard.
not see that, but okay.
I mean, he's up there, but stripped away all the production,
That's wild.
all the big outfits, all the hype and smoke and mirrors. And it's just a raw artist up there singing a song
That's cool.
to his wife, whoever you
Yeah.
see it, but raw art, MTV
Yeah.
Unplugged. You see these
Yep.
tiny desk concerts. And I think that you have evolved into the artist. We talked about being ahead of our time. Eventually, time folds in on each other and catches up. And I think that through your endurance and your persistence and consistency through the years, that your time, you've gotten a taste, but it's eating time now. As long as you stay the path of your authenticity and you're letting go of the resistance and going with the flow of who you truly are. And that's what's gonna take you and continue on to the next level, man. And I'm just so grateful to have witnessed, experienced, and been along on this ride with you because it's very parallel to
Yeah.
our lives. We
Yeah.
have similar birthdays, similar music
Yeah.
paths,
I know.
similar
I know.
missions. I feel like, I feel like we are related in more than just the industry in this beautiful life because the self reflection and the growth uh, is what takes you to and keeps you at that level of success. We should never stop
Yeah.
improving, you
Yeah.
know, and you've done it with athletics and your health and your music, and I'm on the same path, and that's why I wanted to get you on here to share
Yeah.
that story and share your life. My life, my life.
Yeah. Well, and the funny closer on that is like looking back on that song, and it dawned on me very recently singing it, the verses that I originally wrote for the song that obviously got taken off the song for the Bliss and Esso version. I rapped, right? And I wrote the verses and they sounded cool and I didn't really it's interesting when you write your own lyrics sometimes you don't really think about the profound nature of what you're writing, I guess is to say. And I wrote it when I was 30 years old. And now I'm 47 years old, and I was singing the lyrics and actually listening to what I wrote. And I was forecasting my future. Like those lyrics are me now. It is
Yeah.
my story that I have just gone through for the last 27 years. And it's crazy because it is literally me now, like verbatim, like is all the words are like, it was a very wild moment when I was like singing it and going, whoa, I was forecasting 17 years into the future. You know, thinking at the time
Self-fulfilled prophecy.
100%. And like at the time, thinking that I was writing about my past up until that point, which was just the first 10 years. And then 17 more years have passed. And that was really,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool, to like come to Jesus on that one.
It's amazing, you tapped into the, Christ consciousness, of
Yeah,
being
yeah,
able to become who you say you're gonna be, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, man, well, we can sit on here for days. We can
I
live
know.
stream for months, but I
Yeah,
do wanna wrap it up, and thank you so much for sharing your very inspiring story, very eye-opening and very connecting story. I know that your story is just beginning. There's so much more success. We're gonna be rocking plenty of more shows. I'm just so grateful to have been
absolutely.
along with you on this journey and be a part of your family. You know, that I love your brother, dearly as well as you as well, and I'm just, looking forward to many more experiences, seeing you shine, promoting your music, and bringing you out here to back to southern beautiful Cali, and
Love
get
it.
that West Coast tour rocking. Let everybody know where they can go and get all your music through your. I know your website's being reconstructed, but let them know where they can get it.
Yep. I mean, you can find all my stuff online. I like to say, I got all the Twitters.
Yeah,
You can find me online. So yeah, obviously Instagram, however you choose to do your social media these days, whatever app it is that you choose to find, I'm on there all the way to TikTok. I'm not as active as these youngsters are on TikTok, but I do try my best. I even got Snapchat going again, not as
okay.
active as these youngsters, but I got it all there. So just look under CK Jones. You can find me. Obviously, trying to be the most diligent with the YouTube stuff these days because I recognize that was something I was at the beginning of it and I neglected it, and I recognize that it is truly a great outlet of what I do to represent, and so my, YouTube channel is CK Jones TV. You can find me there. I do shorts and as well as I'm getting videos up and yeah, anywhere. And then the website ckjones.com is under construction right now, but it's there. The landing page is there. And then as well as I'm probably going to be bringing back my podcast that I did have, and I had you as a guest on when I did it, which is Keeping Your Dreams Alive.
Yes.
Which is something that I'm doing now is like keeping my dream alive. And it was interesting in doing that podcast with you and a bunch of really great people that it brought up a lot of stuff in internal work that I recognized that I needed to do, and that's why I took the pause on it because by talking to more people about them doing their dreams, I recognize I need to do some internal work to keep my dreams alive as well. So that's coming back as well. You can find the episodes, including the episode I did with you, on Spotify and wherever you choose to, listen to your podcast. And that's CK Jones Keeping Your Dreams Alive podcast. So yeah, that's it, man. I'm out and about, and I'm playing. A lot of the shows that I do these days are based around the Southwest because I do live in Phoenix, Arizona currently. And I'm, trying to play as many places as I can play. So if you like what I'm doing and you want me to come picking and grin in your town, I'll play your house, I'll play your basement. I'll do it all. I haven't
Wow.
I love it all, man. So we can sit on your front porch and I can sing you some songs, or if you got a venue that you want me to come play, I can do that too. So I appreciate you for having me on here, man. To be able to share my story has been something that's truly been important for me because it's something that I've held close, and not a lot of people knew for a long time, like what my journey was. And because I wasn't comfortable letting people understand what I had to do to survive. And now I'm very grateful for the experience that I've had, and I'm grateful to share it. I think it's a powerful thing. So thank you for giving me the platform to do that, and always being a brother to me through these 20 plus years, man. It's been a beautiful ride, and to many more, obviously. So
It's been an honor and a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. This is the Truth from the Booth. That is CK Jones. I am Chris Figueroa, aka DJ Prophet. Thank you so much for all your subscriptions. Thank you so much for tuning in, logging on. Thank you to everybody on Spotify and YouTube who have subscribed and commented on the episodes. Everybody on Instagram at the Truth from the Booth, also from DJ Prophet. We'll be sharing and collaborating with CK Jones on all these shorts. And make sure you check out the full episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell on the YouTube channel so you know every time we drop a new episode. Weekly on Thursdays or so, weekly ish. But we've been on a good run, so we're going to keep up the consistency. But thank you so much once again. Catch the next episode next Thursday. The Truth of the Booth, DJ Prophet, CK Jones. Bam, bam, bam.
yes, sir.
Do it.
Do it.
All right.